Shabbat Shalom and welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Torah study. I'm Yaakov ben Yisrael. And before we begin to read, I'll just wait for people to come in. And in the meantime, I'll post the parasha where we're at. So, Shabbat Shalom, Hakan.
Shalom, wie geht's dir, Jakob?
Alles gut, dir?
Ah ja, auch gut. Hörst du mich gut?
Ja, heute dich sehr gut.
Okay, because
Meine laut? Ist okay?
yeah, no, it's perfect. I have the first time headset, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So, I sent you a few things in WhatsApp.
Yeah, I saw them, but I couldn't open them right now because I was had no time, you know. But
No,
I
that's
will
no
have a
problem.
look at it.
And I'm actually reading something at the moment about the Karaites in Galicia.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that there was a man named Shariah Shapsal. I think you know who he is.
Yeah, I've heard of him. But he was from Lithuania or not?
Yeah, and he changed the title Hacham to a Turkish name.
Yes.
And the Turkish was Hakan. That's what I thought was pretty interesting. He was the first one to do that. And interestingly, that most of the Lithuanian Karaites back in the 1700s, I forgot the exact date, it was in the 1700s, they were required to take a family name.
Mm-hmm.
And so in Galicia, they took names from the Tanakh and they changed it to the Polish equivalent. Mm-hmm. For instance, the family or the name Noah, okay, in Polish is Nowak. And okay. So they took the name as a family name, so it's Novakovic. Okay. Mm-hmm. And those are Karaite families. And what they did in Lithuania was just the opposite. They instead of taking Lithuanian names or whatever, they took Turkish names. So they took the Turkish equivalents of mm-hmm. of the Hebrew names and made family names out of it. And if I remember, no, that's something I was going to say. The family, like the Polish, is the Witz, which means the son of. I was going to say that might be the same for Turkish, but I don't think so. But interestingly, in Ge'ez, in the Ethiopian languages, to mm-hmm. say son of somebody, you also attach Witz to the end of it, which is kind of interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I heard that. I have read 1 month ago about Shariah Shapsal.
Yeah.
And I think he was a follower of Firkovic, or Abraham Firkovic.
I don't know if he was a follower of Firkovich, but there is amongst later academic circles, there's this lie being told that Abraham Firkovich was responsible for getting the Russian government, it was still an imperial government in his day, to recognize Karaites as non-Jews, and that's not true. And I actually posted this in Facebook. You see it in the Wikipedia article, and you see it in different other places too. But they say Firkovich was he went about trying to prove that the Karaites were not Jews and blah blah blah. Okay, actually, what happened was you had a Karaite delegation that was sent to the Empress Catherine the Great, and they basically brought some kind of evidence. We don't know. We never find out what the evidence was, but they went to the court of Catherine the Great and said, "Look, we're not Judeans," and that's what they were getting at. It's not that they weren't Jews per se, but they're saying, and they used the term Jew in the actual way the Tanakh
we are not. We didn't. What did he say? I have read a similar passage where they tried to get, not responsible for the taxes in the Russian Empire, and the main argument was that they are not responsible
for the death of Jesus,
for the death and the killing of Jesus. Right. And I have read that this was the main argument, so they got free. They could. The same thing happened in the Holocaust.
Okay, look, that's what I'm getting at. They try to pin this on Firkovich, and the reason why it's so important that modern academics do that, especially amongst Jews, and especially now the Karaites are jumping on board with this. Especially the Egyptian Karaites, is because there were certain people who said Firkovich lied and he forged documents, which is now coming out that wasn't even true. The allegation that he forged this information, they're finding out that that's actually incorrect. He didn't forge it. But the reason why that's so important is because if they say that Firkovich is the one who started this, then they can say, "Oh, that's just another one of his lies and misinformation." When that actually happened, when he was 9 years old when the delegation went to Catherine the Great. Now, the impetus was that they were taxed; they were overly taxed, just like the rabbinic Jews were taxed. They had the same kind of taxation and problems that the other Jewish communities had. So they go to Catherine the Great. They present her some evidence. Whatever this evidence was, we don't really know, but it had to be pretty good because she accepted the claim.
Are you sure that they presented an evidence or any proof, any document, or was it just a dialogue with her?
Well, let me ask you this, Hakham. If I am your subject, I live in your area, okay? You rule this area. You get from me twice the amount of taxes you get from any other citizen. And then I come to you and I say, "Hey, man, I think this is unfair. You shouldn't tax." Are you going to say, "Okay, well, you don't have to pay me that much anymore"? No, you're not going to cut your money off without a solid reason. But we're never told exactly what the proof was. But the idea was this: look, we aren't responsible for what the Jews did. Okay, you had the problem with the Jews and Jesus. We didn't have that problem. We were sent here at the time of Sennacherib, when he exiled the northern Israelites, and so we're Israelites, and that's really important. The delegation didn't say that they were not Israelites. They said they were from the northern Israelites. We aren't Judeans, and that's really important to make that distinction.
Yes.
It wasn't that they were saying we're not religiously the same as the Jews. That's not what it is. The Jews invented this idea of Judaism.
Yes.
Okay, and so anybody who doesn't toe the line of their Judaism claim are considered non-Jews, just like the Samaritans, But they,
Jacob, that's what I meant with if you use the term or the sentence Karaite Judaism. It is a contradiction in itself.
It's a misnomer. That's right. That's a misnomer. But because Judaism, in effect, means the religious or the religious traditions of the Judean people.
Yes.
And that's how it all began. And so when you go to any rabbinic Jew, when you ask him what is Judaism, he's going to tell you it's keeping the Talmud, because that's exactly what Judaism is. And because you don't have that in northern Israel, the Israelites don't do that. The Samaritans don't have a Talmud, and that's how the Karaites view themselves. They have the Torah, they have the Tanakh, but there's no Talmud. There's no tradition that was passed down from the time of Moses until the time it got written down in the 2nd century. And it's really important to make that distinction, that when the delegation went to Catherine the Great, whatever it is they brought with them, they had to bring some kind of proof. She's not just going to cut her finances off just because somebody said it's a good idea to do that. So they had to present some kind of evidence that their claim was correct, and whatever it was, she accepted it. So it had to have been pretty good claims. I don't think she would have been, cut her financial, because it wasn't just for them in that generation. Once it was accepted, their children, they were allowed to inherit property. They had rights just like any other citizen of the Russian Empire at the time. The soldiers couldn't be housed in their homes. They didn't have to pay all those crazy taxes that the Jewish community had to pay. So she was cutting herself financially by doing that. And it makes no sense that just because she happened to like the way the Baboviches had, that pretty smile of his, okay, that's nothing. She would have had to have had proof that would have had to have been verified for her to have made that drastic measure.
Well, I think it's worth research, what this proof was or could be.
Well, that's the point of what Firkovich did. He brought the proof saying that the Karaites were there at the time of Sennacherib, and that's what the Ivnei HaZikaron was. He published a book called the Stones of Memorial, or the Memorial Stones, and basically he went through Crimea and the different places that had large Karaite communities, and he started taking down the dates on the tombstones and when these people were there, and he basically said that the dates say that they were there, long before the Jewish community even existed, or the time of Jesus. And that's that book, Ivnei HaZikaron, is what they're saying is a forgery. They said he went around and forged it, and a lot of their accusation centers on the fact that at the time of Sennacherib, they didn't have the square Aramaic writing that we have today in Hebrew, what we call the Hebrew script today. They used a form of Paleo-Hebrew, and so they said, well, it couldn't have been that. He had to have lied about the dates. But they never entertained the idea that maybe the tombstones were repaired and rewritten. But anyways, the point is they labeled him as being a fraud, And by saying that he was the one who started this idea that the Karaites in Europe were not Jews, that's easy for them to discount the claim and say,
Yes.
"Oh well, it's just a bunch of nonsense from Firkovitz and Shopsaw." But that actually started long before they were ever born.
Obviously, yes.
Anyway, so we're reading Shalom, Rich. Thanks for joining us.
Shalom.
So we are, let me put this on the screen. We're in Parashath WayYigash, and that's in Genesis chapter 44. We'll start at verse 18. So I have a new little app here.
Did we read it last week until 18? 44, 18?
No.
No.
we never
But-
we never get to the end of it. So I got a new app that actually has an English translation. So I'll try to just read how their English translation. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know how good it is. I'm just looking through the app. I don't know. Anyway, so now it's almost 18 minutes or 17 minutes into the program. I'll go ahead and begin to read. Before I do that, let me post the join link here so that anyone can join. If they want to join, and then I'll go post it here for Melech when Melech decides he wants to come. Okay. So, verse 18. ויגש אליו יהודה ויאמר בי אדוני ידבר נא עבדך דבר באוזני אדוני ואל יהר אפך בעבדך כי כמוך כפרעה. And so Yehuda came, or Judah came near to him, and he says, please, my Lord, let your servant speak something in my Lord's ear, and don't be angry at your servant, because you are just like Pharaoh. Verse 19. Ricky, Scary, hello. Good Shabbos. Yeah. So if you have any questions, you can write them in the comments. Of course, I probably won't get them immediately. So if I answer them seemingly late, that's because I have a delay on my message board, and I'm also reading, so I don't always look at it. But if you have a question, just jump right in. If you have a comment, Hakham, you can stop me anytime.
Yes.
So verse 19. אדוני שאל את עבדיו לאמור, היש לכם אב או אח? My Lord asked his servant, saying, do you have a father or a brother? Verse 20. ונאמר אל אדוני, יש לנו אב זקן, וילד זקנים קטן, ואחיו מת, ויוותר הוא לבדו לאמו ואביו אחיו. And we said to our master, to our Lord, we have an old father, and he has a young son of his old age. and his brothers dead, and he alone remains for his mother and father, or of his mother, and his father loves him. So we made a point about this last week. Now we have this scene where the brothers of Joseph came to him, wanted some food. He accused them of being spies, and at first said, "Hey, leave one of your brothers." It happened to be Shimon or Simon. They went back. His father didn't want to send Benjamin, which is one of the requests that Joseph made. You send this young son, so that I'll know that you're speaking truly. And so the brothers went back home with the food, and on the way they realized, hey, the money's back. Not only do we have food, the money's back. Now he just called us spies. Now he's going to think we're thieves, right? So the father finally decides, okay, I'll send Benjamin, right? And so now they went back, and we didn't read this part during the last study, of course, but Joseph set it up so that his personal cup, was put in Benjamin's bag, and then now Benjamin is going to end up being a slave to Joseph, who they don't know at this time is their brother. And so now you have Judah saying, look, this is the scene now. Judah's got to figure out a way to get Benjamin out of this situation. But we talk about why Joseph made this test. Remember, he was sold to Egypt because his brothers were jealous. Now, Joseph was the firstborn son of Rachel, who was the beloved wife of Jacob. Jacob loved Rachel, and of course, Rachel ended up dying, but he loved Joseph, right? It says he loved Joseph more than he loved any of his other brothers. Well, now Joseph was sold to the Egyptians because of the jealousy of his brothers, right? And so the question was, what's going on with Benjamin? Well, the reason why he wanted Benjamin to be brought was because he knew that now that he's out of the way, out of the picture, Benjamin's born, he would receive the same love that Joseph was receiving when he was there. So now you have the same situation. Oh, Jacob is loving Benjamin more than the other brothers because he's the last son of his now dead wife, who was the beloved wife. And so he's basically giving a test to his brothers to see, have they gotten over this jealousy, right? And so that's why Benjamin was brought. And so this is where we're at now. Just to explain what's going on. So we're on 21. وَتَوْمِرْ إِلْ عَبْدِخَا هُرِذُوهُ إِلَيْ وَأَسِيمَ عَيْنَاي أَلَاهُ. And you said to your servants, bring him to me, and let me lay my hands upon him, right? Because I want to lay my hands upon him. 22. Well, no man.
One question,
yeah.
Yaakov. Is it hands or eyes?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll lay my eyes upon him.
Because I'm reading a Shabbat online Torah edition, and
yeah, you're right. It's eyes, not hands.
Okay.
Verse 22. وَالنُّومِرْ الْعَدُونِي لو يُخَالْ حَنَّارْ لِعَزُوْفْ إِتْ أَبِيفْ وَعَزَاف إِتْ أَبِيفْ وَمَيْثْ. So this is what they're saying. And we said to my Lord, the young man, the Na'ar, is not able to forsake his father, meaning to leave from his father's side, because if he were to leave his father, then his father would die. Okay. And that's dying from grief, more than likely. وَالتَّوْمِرْ الْعَبْدَيْخَ إِمْ لَوْ يِرَيْدْ أَخِيكَمْ حَكَتُونَ إِتَّخَمْ لَوْ تُوصِفُونَ لِرْأُوتْ پَنَاي. And you said to your servants, if your younger brother does not come down with you, you will no longer see my face. Which means they wouldn't be able to receive grain. Probably Simon would remain in jail. He was put in jail at that time. And the family in the land of Canaan, who was still there, they would have probably died, which was the concern that started this whole narrative. And Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, that Joseph pretty much saved the Egyptians from starvation. And he told his sons, why are you sitting here looking at each other? Go down to Egypt and buy grain so that we will live and not die. And so that was the concern. So, verse 24. وَيْهِي خِيَالِينُ الْعَبْدِخَ أَبِي وَنَاغِدْ لَوْ إِثْ دِبْرِ أَدُونِي. And it was as we went up to your servant, our father, and we informed him of the words of our Lord, of my Lord. وَيَوْمَرْ أَبِينُ شُوفُوا شِفْرُوا لَانُ مِئَةْ أُخَرٍ. Our father said, return, buy grain for us, or buy for us a little bit of grain to eat. Verse 26. Let's check my feed real quick. Verse 26. وَالنُّمِرْ لَوْ نُخَالْ لَرَادَتْ إِمْ يَشْ أَخِينُ هَكَتُونَ إِتَّانُ وَيَرَدْنُ כי לא נוכל לראות פני האיש ואחינו הקטון איננו איתנו. And we said, we're not able to go down if our younger brother is not with us. Excuse me. We're not able to go down. If our younger brother is with us, then we can go down, because we're not able to see the face of the man while our younger brother is not with us. 27. وَيَوْمِرْ عَبْدِخَ أَبِي أَلَيْنُ أَتِّمْ يَدَعْتِمْ كِي شِنَيْمْ يَلِدَ لِي إِشْتِي. And your servant, our father, said to us, you know that my wife had 2 sons for me. And I just want you to think about the situation here. All the other sons are hearing what Jacob's saying about these 2 boys. He loved these 2 boys. It seems like he didn't really care about the other brothers, but that's not really true either, because he was concerned, because he complained earlier, now I've lost Shimon, or Simon. So we know Jacob loved his sons, but this is all that he had from the wife that he ended up having to work 14 years for. But it's a strange scene. 28. ويسي هائحات مئتي وأمار أخ طرف طرف ولو رئيتي أدهين. And the one has gone out from me, And I said, he has been torn, and I have not seen him even until now. So when he's talking about Joseph, when he sent him out to check on his brothers, of course, that's when this incident happened, that he was sold to the Egyptians, and the brothers took his coat and put blood on it, took it to the father, and the father said, oh, well, he must have been killed by a wild animal. مساء الخير عبد الغني، كيف حالك اليوم؟ Guy speaking Arabic here. Anyway, he said good evening. So I said good evening back. So any questions up to this point?
I don't have any question right now.
Okay, good. So verse 29. ולקחתם גם את זה מעם פניי, וקרاه אסון, והורדתם את סבתי ברעה שאולה. And you've also taken this one from me. And if something happens to him, now the word ason here means something bad. It can mean death, or it could mean just some injury happens to him. And he's talking about Benjamin. Then you would have brought my gray hair to hell, or to the grave. Bira'ah, which means basically, literally it means with evil, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean evil, just mean bad or something terrible. Ra is always completely opposite of tov. So whatever you think good is, this is its opposite. Verse 30. وَعَتَّى كَضَئِيِّ الْعَبْدِ خَأَبِي وَهَنَّاعَرْ أَيْنِنُّ إِتَانُ وَنَفْشُ كَشُورَ بِنَفْشُ. Now this is a cool phrase here. And now, as I go to your servant my father, and the young man is not with us, because his soul is bound with his soul. Kashura means to be bound up or tied or connected. In fact, a part of what's called the Shema and the Ahavta is talking about the binding of the totafot, or the zikaron, between your eyes and on your arms. And so it uses this same verb, ukashartam le'ot al yedecha, and you shall bind them as signs upon your head. So this is the same verb here. Kashura is basically a participle, but it's a passive participle, which means his soul is bound with his soul. Talking about the soul of Jacob is bound to the soul of Benjamin. 31. وحياه כי ראותו כי אין הנער ומת, והורידו עבדיך את שיבת עבדך אבינו בירון שאולה. And it shall be, as he sees that the young man is not with us, he will die. And your servants will have brought down our father, your servant, our father, mourning into the grave. So he this is what he said earlier about Joseph. I'll go down mourning him to the grave, into the grave.
But
32.
one question,
Yeah.
Jacob. I mean, especially Judah knows his father very well, and he knows because of the fate of Joseph. But Joseph himself, I mean, we have to imagine in what big conflict, psychological conflict it is, because he is hiding his who he is, and the fact that he is the lost brother or the killed brother or the sold brother. He has a lot of patience. I mean, I don't know if a normal person would be able to do that. It is really an amazing situation.
Well, this is all a test on the part of Joseph. Joseph knows he's not going to allow any of this to happen, and that his father be further harmed emotionally by the loss of Benjamin. He's just wanting to see what is going on with them. Have they lost this jealousy that they had for Joseph, and now he's thinking possibly for Benjamin, and now he's seeing that the brothers were indeed sorry for what happened, and sorry, they don't want their father to die either, right?
Yes.
And that's the whole point. Look, you're going to kill our dad. It's going to kill him, if he loses this child too. And this is basically what they're saying. And so he's not going to do it anyway. But he's seeing the conflict, the terror that the brothers having, and the concern that they're having for their father. And that's what Joseph was really wanting to see. He wanted to see the change that they had. And as he sees this change, and he sees the terror that's going across the faces of his brothers at the thought that, okay, now we're going to lose Benjamin, and our father's going to die. It's going to kill him. That's when all the emotion comes out. Now he realizes, okay, well, they have changed. They are sorry, and that's what he's looking for. Yeah. And that's what we're about to see, this emotional outpouring from Joseph, and he allays their fears and their concerns and explains to them, hey, you thought that you were acting in doing this, but in reality it was God who worked through you to save you. We're about to read that here in a minute. So where was I? 32, I think.
Yeah, 32. Yes.
כי עבדך ערב את הנער מעם אבי לאמור, אם לא אביאנו אליך והטעתי לאבי כל הימים. Because your servant has Arab means to make a surety, to make a pledge concerning the young man with my father, saying, if I don't bring him to you, then my sin will be against my father for the rest of my days. Kul hayamim, all the days. 33. وعتا يشفنا عبدك تحت هالنار عبد لأدوني وهالنار يعلم إخاف. And so now, sit your servant in the place of the young man, talking about himself, as a servant to my Lord, and the young man let him go up with his brothers, and let him return to Canaan with his brothers. So now you have now we have to remember back at the very beginning, Reuben was the first to speak up. He said, we're not going to kill him. Yes. Because he wanted, and he suggested putting him in this pit evidently he knew what the pit was, that it was empty, and he would be perfectly fine there. Because it says he wanted to go back and return him to his father. So he was hoping to get this all mulled over and bring Yosef back to Yaakov. So he didn't want anything to happen to him at all. And it says, as they were eating, that Judah spoke up and said, we aren't going to kill Joseph because he's our brother, he's our flesh and blood. So you have these two of the older brothers saying we're not going to harm him, and the intention was, we know on the part of Reuben to return him, and probably Judah was wanting to do the same thing. But I do think it was Judah who mentions selling him or something, if I remember correctly. But anyway, so now Judah says, hey, you know, I've basically traded my life for his with my father. I can't go back, you know, without him. So take me in this place, because I said I would be his surety. That means I will, whatever happens, I will give up my life for his, so that he can come back safely. That's what.
One question: Do you think that he regrets what he did? I mean, is he doing this now for his father, or for the failure or the mistake he made with Joseph?
Probably a little both, because you know he didn't want to kill Joseph either, but
yes,
something happened. They don't really know what happened to Joseph. They just know they came back to the well and he was gone. And that's what I think Reuben said when he goes back. He comes back and says, how can I go to my father now? We don't, where is he? He's gone.
Yes.
What's going to happen? So they were shocked that Joseph was not there. So at this point, they still don't know they're speaking to Joseph. Verse 34. Ki eich ele il avi وهالنهار أينن إتي pin ir bara asher yimsa et abi. And so he continues speaking to Joseph, because how can I go up to my father and the young man is not with us, or he's not with me, unless pin ir unless I see the evil, which will find my father, meaning he's going to see the evil, talking about his father, the death of his father is what he's thinking. So we're in 45, first verse. Yeah, first verse. ולא יכול יוסף להתעפק לכל הניצבים עליו, ויקרא הוציאו כל איש מעלי, ולא אמר איש איתו, והתוודע יוסף אל אחיו. And so Joseph was not able to contain himself, because of all the people that was standing around him. And so he cried out, every man or everyone, leave out from me. And there was no one who stood with him, as he made himself known to his brothers. So the court, the Egyptian court that would have been with Joseph, he sent away. The only one standing there with him was his brothers. Verse 2, ويتين ادخلوا بفقي ويشمع مصرعيم ويشمع بيت فارو. And so he it says literally he gave his voice to crying, which means basically he began to cry. Give me just a second here. Sorry, I had to sneeze.
Çok yaşa, çok yaşa.
So he began to cry, he began to weep, and the Egyptian heard, and even the house of Pharaoh heard the weeping. Verse 3. وَيَوْمَرْ يُوسَف إِلْإِخَافِ أَنِ يُوسَف هَعُوذ أَبِهَاي. That's the concern. Okay. وَلَوْ يَخَلُوا إِخَافِ لِعَنُوث أَوْثَوْ كِي نِفْهَلُوا مِفَنَا. And so Yosef said to his brothers, I'm Yosef. Is my father still alive? Okay. That's the concern. Is my father still alive? Because and his brothers were not able to answer him.
They were shocked.
Yeah, they were shocked.
They were shocked. The shock of their life.
وَيَوْمَرْ يُوسَف إِلْإِخَافِ جِشُونَا إِلَيْ وَيَجِشُوا وَيَوْمَرْ أَنِ يُوسَف أَخِيكُمْ أَشَرْ مِخَرْتِمْ أُثِي مِتْزْرَيْمَ. And so Yosef said to his brothers, come near to me. And they came near. And he says, I'm Yosef, your brother, who you sold to Egypt. Verse 5. وَأَعْتَى أَلْ تَعْتَبُوا وَأَلْ يَخَارَ بِعَنَيْخِمْ كِي مِخَارَتِمْ أُثِيهِنَّ كِي لِمِخْيَا شَلَّحَنِي إِلَهِيم لِفَنَيْخِمْ. And now, don't be angry. Yeah. Don't be angry and don't let it be. Yahara also means the same thing. Don't be angry in your eyes that you have sold me here, because it was to li mechaya, which means mechaya means to preserve life. Is basically what it's saying. To preserve life. God sent me before you. So Yosef lets him know it's not you acting here, it was God who sent. כי זה שנתיים הרעב בקרב הארץ ועוד 5 שנים אשר אין חריש וקציר. Says for for these 2 years the famine is in the midst of the land, and we have another 5 years which there will be no kharish wa qasir, which is basically sowing and reaping, or plowing and reaping. I think kharish. Let's see what this says here. This is verse 7. Yeah, plowing. Kharish, that's what I thought. Plowing and harvest. And that's because Yosef already gathered all the grain during the years of plenty. And you have to ask yourself about this famine. I remember, I think it was last Shabbat, I kept saying drought for some reason. I don't know why drought was on my mind, but they couldn't grow anything, which is why there was a famine, why there was hunger. So evidently it must have had something to do with the drought, because the only reason they wouldn't have any crops grow is because they wouldn't be any rain, which is why the Nile probably was in a weakened state, had to be in a weakened state, if even in Egypt they wouldn't be able to plant and grow. But anyway, it does say hara'av, so it says the famine. Verse 7. ويشلحني إلهيم لفنيكم لستم لكم شعريث بأرض ولحيوث لكم لفليتا جدلا. Now this is a really interesting statement that he says here. He says, for God sent me before you to set for you she'erith. When it talks about the remnant of Israel, this is the word they use, she'erith. It just means the remnant, what's left over. Okay? And so he says to set a remnant in the earth, to set for you a remnant in the land or in the earth, and to L'chahayoth means to allow life. Now, in modern Hebrew, this means to revive. Like when you talk about reviving biblical Hebrew as a spoken language, you would use this verb in the Hifil, l'chahayoth. But it says to preserve you alive, and it says faleta gedola, which Palit is someone who escapes. The person who came and told Abraham that Lot was taken captive, he was called a Palit. But it says to preserve you alive as a great escape or a great rescue. And we're also now beginning the third aliyah, which I didn't mention. So this is verse 8. وعتا لو أتم شلحتم أوثي هينا كيها إلهيم ويسميني لأب لفرعون ولأذون لكل بيته وموشل بكل أرض مصرين. Now I want you to pay attention to this. And this is a point I've made many times. And now you have not sent me here, but God. And he has placed me as a father to Pharaoh, and as the Lord of all his house, and as a ruler over all the land of Egypt. Moshe, when it talks about in the prophecy of Beit Lehem being the smallest of all the cities of Judah, but from you would come one who would rule over the tribes. That's the Moshel here. It's the same word, which means someone who rules. And remember, it said that Joseph was set as a shalit, which is also means someone who has power and actually rules an empire. In fact, you get the word sultan from the same word, shalit. In fact, the Turkish sultan, how this worked, back when they had the Abbasid Caliphate, you had the Caliph in Baghdad, but then you had the sultan in Turkey. And the sultan basically ruled the empire on behalf of the Caliph. And later, he ended up taking control of the empire because the Caliphate was basically in shambles. But that's the point. You had Pharaoh, who was actually the king of Egypt, but then you had Yosef, who was the Shalit, who was the one who actually ruled the administrative part of the empire. Verse 9. محروا وعلوا إلى عبي وأمارتم إله Cho amar benech Yosef, samani Elohim le'adon lekol Misraim, rida elai al ta'amod. And now, no, excuse me, verse 9. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, so says your son Yosef, God has set me or installed me as the Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me and don't remain there. Verse 10. ويشفت بإرث غوشن وحيث قرب إلي أتى أبني بنيخ وصنخ وبقرك وخل أشر لك. And you shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your sons, your grandsons, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. Now, remember we read it. We read it in the Parashath, but I'm not sure if we went over it in the study. But during the famine, or during the good years, Joseph made these cities to collect the grain, or whatever was brought to them to store up for food. And then as the famine was happening in these 2 years, the people of Egypt began to come to him. Now, before this famine, the lords, or the princes, or whatever you want to call it, the landlords of Egypt, they were all independent and they were free. But during this famine, they sold themselves as slaves to Pharaoh. That's how the Pharaoh became really the true ruler of all Egypt, because they all sold their lands to him, and they all became basically serfs to the house of Pharaoh. And the only exception was the priesthood. The Egyptian priesthood did not sell their land, and they didn't have to pay anything as far as taxes. Now, it's important to note that Joseph married into the priesthood of the Egyptians, and so of course he lived in Goshen. That's where the land of the priests was in Goshen. And so now he's setting his family up. So now and the reason why I mention that is because as Joseph is working with this administration to save Egypt, his ultimate goal is to save his family. But not only to save his family, but to put them basically in charge of the Egyptians. He brings them to Egypt and sets them in the land of the priesthood of the Egyptians, and they are all members of the house of the Shalit, the Lord of Egypt. So they're basically the ruling class. And so he brings these Israelites in and installs them as co-rulers in Egypt. Basically, is what he's doing. Okay, verse 11. וכלכלתי אותך שם, כי עוד 5 שנים רעב, פן תוורש אתה וביתך וכל אשר לך. And I shall provide for you there, because there's 2 more or 5 more years of this famine. Pin tiwaresh ata ubeitecha v'kol asher. Unless you are, basically this word means to be inherited, which basically unless you lose everything you have, your house and all this with you. Verse 12. Wahine einechem ro'ot وعين أخي بنيامين كفي همدبر عليهم. And your eyes, and behold, your eyes are seeing, as well as the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is the mouth of the one speaking to you. Talking about Joseph. So he's saying, go tell your father that Joseph is alive, come down to me. And so he's saying, you're seeing me, and also Benjamin seeing me. All right. وهجتم لأبيه ادخل خبودي بمصرين وادخل أشار رئيسا ومهارتم وهرادتم at أبيهن. And you shall inform my father all of my glory in Egypt, and all that you have seen, and you shall hurry and bring my father here. Verse 14. ويبول على سو وري بنيامين أخي ويفق وبنيامين بخا al sawara. And so he fell upon the neck of Benjamin his brother, and he wept, and Benjamin also wept upon his neck. Verse 15. وينشيخ لكل إخاف ويفق عليهم وآخرين دبروا إخاف إتو. And so he kissed all of his brothers, and he cried upon them, and afterwards his brothers spoke with him. Verse 17. وهقل نشمع بيت فارعو لمور باءوا أخي يوسف ويتاب بعيني فارعو وبعيني عبده. And this is strange because it says, and the voice was heard by the house of Pharaoh, which basically is probably talking about all this commotion, this crying, and the weeping, and probably the rejoicing, loud talking, I'm sure, happening. So that was heard by the house of Pharaoh, saying that the brothers of Joseph have come, and it is good. It was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, as well as in the eyes of his servant. So let me check my chat here. Okay, so weit, so good. So verse 17. ويومر پارعو إل يوسف إمور إل أخيها زوت عسو طعنوا أت بعيرهم ولخو فو أرض كنان. And so Pharaoh said to Joseph, speak to your brothers, and this is what you shall do. تعانوا at بعيركم, load your animals, and go to the land of Canaan. Verse 18. ukhu at أبيكم وأت بتيكم وبوءوا إلي وإتنا لكم أت توف أرض مصرين وإخلوا أت حلف هارت. and take your father and your house, or your houses, plural, and come to me, and I will give to you all the good of Egypt, of the land of Egypt, and eat the fat of the land. That's interesting. Verse 19. وأتى سويث الزوت عسو كهولكم مئرة مصريم أغلوث لتبخم ولنشيخم ونساثم et avichem ubachem. And now, and I want to make a point here about this. This is a pet peeve of mine about the vowels in Hebrew. There's this myth going around that ancient Hebrew didn't have the various vowels that we have today. And it says, and you are commanded, this you shall do. So it says, Wa'ata suwaitha. Suwaitha is the passive, which means you are commanded. But without that first you vowel, it would you wouldn't be able to distinguish if it's a passive or an active. So if it's an active, it would be Sawatha, Sawatha Zot, or Sawatha Zot Asu, which would be, and now you have commanded, and this they shall do. But that's not what it says. It says, and you are commanded. Okay, so Pharaoh's talking to the brothers and basically said, what you have just now been commanded to do, that's what you have to do. So don't believe that garbage about the monovocalic nature of ancient Hebrew. That's just incorrect. So now you have been commanded this, do. Take for you from the land of Egypt agaloth, which means calves, for your little ones and for your wives, and uneshathim, and you shall bring you shall carry your father, and you shall come. Verse 20. وعينكم أل تخوص على خليكم كي طوف كل أرث مصريم لكم هو. So this is al techos al khaleichem. It is as for your eyes, wa'anechem al techos, and basically saying don't let your eyes take concern over the goods or over your things, because of the good of kitov kul eretz Mitzrayim, because all of the land of Egypt is good, and it is for you. Now, the only part of the land of Egypt at this time that was good was Goshen, and we'll see here in the next few weeks. We will begin Shemoth, and we'll actually see what's going on in this land of Goshen. And later, the plagues that actually hit, we'll see that the first 3 plagues, I think it's first 3 plagues, happened to everyone equally, also to the Israelites. They had to live through, or they had to experience the first 3 plagues along with the Egyptians. But after that, starting, I think it was the 4th plague, starting with that plague, God said he made a distinction. He divided, or he separated between the Israelites in Goshen and the Egyptians everywhere else. So all the good of Egypt at the moment happens to be in Goshen, which is where they're going to be going to live. Verse 21, وَيَعْصُوا خَيْنْ بَنِي يِسْرَائِيل وَيُتَيْنَ لَهِمْ يُوسَيْف أَغَلُوث عَلْى بِي فَرْعَوْ وَيُتَيْنَ لَهِمْ سَيْدَ لَدَارِخ. And so the children of Israel did so, and Joseph gave to them these cows, or these calves, according to the authority of Pharaoh. You see this a lot. You see like P Torah or P Moshe. Now you have P Pharaoh, Al P Pharaoh. You see this also in Devarim 17, Al P I think it's Al P Mishpat there. But while it literally means at the mouth of Pharaoh, it's talking about at his authority, based upon authority of Pharaoh. And he gave to them Seidah Ladarech. He gave them provision or food for the way, for the trip. Verse 22, לכולם נתן לאיש חליפות שמלות, ולבנימין נתן 300 כסף ו5 חליפות שמלות. And so for each one he gave to a change of clothes, so a single change of clothes. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothes. And now this is really interesting for those who actually know Arabic out there, or are familiar with Islamic terminology. We have this idea of in Arabic khalifa or khalaf. Khalaf means something that comes afterwards. Here in Hebrew we have the same word khalaf, which means to change. Here it's talking about a change of clothing, which is talking about the clothes that comes after. But this same word is used in Arabic as the ruler of the Islamic world, in the Khalif. Has nothing really to do with anything, just for me. These are interesting things that rattle around in my brain. Verse 23. ולאביו שלח כזאת 10 חמורים נוסעים מטוב מצרים ו10 אתונות נוסעות בר ולחם ומזוז לאביו לדרך. And for his father he sent like such 10 mules carrying all the good of Egypt, or carrying of the good of Egypt, and 10 athonot. These are the young mules, also carrying grain and food and provision for his father for the journey. Verse 24. וישלח את אחיו וילכו ויאמר אליהם אל תרגזו בדרך. And so he sent his brothers, and they went. And he said to them, Lo tirgazu baderek. Don't depart from the way. verse 25. وَيَعْلُوا مِن مِّصْرَيْمَ وَيَبُوءُ أَرْضَ كِنَعَانَ إِلَى يَعْقُوبَ أَبِيهِمْ. And so they went up from Egypt, and they came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father. Any questions so far? Okay. That is the end of the fourth aliyah. Now we're beginning the fifth. Or actually, we got one more verse, and then we'll be on the fifth aliyah. Verse 26. ويجدوا له לאמור عود יוסף חי וכי הוא מושל בכל ארץ מצרים ויפaq ליבו כי לא האמין להם. And they informed him, saying, Yosef still lives. عود يوسف خي. Yosef still lives. And that he is the ruler of all the land of Egypt. And his heart failed. Yafog libo, and his heart failed because he didn't believe him. 27. ويدبروا إلى أدخل دبر يوسف أشر دبر إليهم ويار את העגלות أشر שלח יוסף לשאת אותו ותחי רוח יעקב أביהם. And so they spoke with him all the words that Joseph spoke to them. And he saw, come on, his father, saw, and his father saw the agalot, which is talking about these calves, that Joseph sent to carry him. وَتَحِي ruach Yaakov, and the spirit of Yaakov, their father, was revived, was brought back to life. 28. ويومر يسرائيل راب عود يوسف بني حي إلخا وإر إن بترم أموت. And Yisrael says, Rav Od Yosef ben Yechai. It is Rav Od Yosef ben Yechai. It is enough, basically, what he's saying. Yosef, my son, is alive. I want to go and I want to see him before I die. Now we are in chapter 46, starting at the first verse. Let's see. I just want to keep checking my messages. Okay. First verse. ويسع إسرائيل وكل أشر له ويبو بئر شابع ويذبح ذبحين لإلهي أبيه يtzhak, which is another strange way to put it. And so Israel journeyed and all that he had, and he came to Beersheba, and he sacrificed sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And that, I've always found that to be kind of strange, which really, I guess if you think about it, they all say to the God of my fathers. And God even identified himself to Moses as the God of your fathers. But it just seems kind of strange that it doesn't say to the Lord his God, or to his God. It says to the God of his father Isaac. Verse 2. وَيَوْمِرْ Elohim لِيِسْرَائِيل במראות הלילה. ויאמר יעקב יעקב, ויאמר הנני. And so God spoke to Israel in a vision of the night, which is a dream. And he says, Yaakov, Yaakov. And he said, here I am. So God says, Yaakov, Yaakov. That's how he calls somebody. And he responded, Hineni, here I am. Verse 3, Vayomer, Anochi ha'el Elohi avicha, al tira merda Misraima, ki leroy gadol asimecha sham. And this is another part we mentioned this, I'm pretty sure last Shabbat, but let me read the verse and then we'll talk about it. And he says, I am the God of your father. Don't be afraid of going down to Egypt, because I will make you a great nation there. Now, last week we read in Devarim 26. Get there. '26. Where is it here? So it's 26, and we're going to be reading verse 5. Now, the Pesach story began at the story of Joseph. That's what a lot of people don't realize, is that when we read about the story of Pesach, we have to begin with Joseph, because this is where it begins. And the ending of the Pesach story is not with the Exodus. It's in this verse here. Whenever you come into the land and you gather in your first fruits for the first time, it says you got to put them in a basket, and you set the basket before the Kohen. Okay. And then verse 5, it says, وَعَنِيثَ وَمَارْتَ لِفْنَيْ أَدُونَي إِلَهَيْخَ أَرَمِّي عُبَيْدْ أَبِي وَيَرِثْ مِصْرَيْمَ وَيَغُورْ شَامْ بِمِثَيْ مِعَات وَيَهِشَمْ لِغَوْيْ غَدَوْل عَتُمْ مُرَاv. And you shall answer and say before Adonai your God, a perishing Aramean was my father. My father was a perishing Aramean. And he went down to Egypt, and he dwelt there, or he resided there with a few men. And there he became a great and mighty and numerous nation. Okay, and so this is what it's talking about. It's the same thing here. So he has this vision in the night, and God is telling him, "Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt, because there I'm going to make you a great nation." So I'm going to make a short pause. Somebody wrote me something here, and what's that? Okay. So verse 4. Anochi Ered Immecha Mitzrayma Anochi A'alach Gam Alo Yosef Yashit Yado Al Anecha. I myself, I am going with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you back up. And Joseph, he shall set his hand upon your eyes. And now we know Yaakov, he didn't actually return to Canaan in his lifetime, but when he dies, he's going to be embalmed and taken back to Canaan by his children. So verse 5, ويقوم يعقوب מבאר שבע וישאו בני ישראל את יעקב אביהם ואת טפם ואת נשיהם בעגלות אשר שלח פרעה לשאת אותו. And so Yaakov stood up from Beersheba, and the children of Israel carried their father Yaakov and their little ones and their wives on these agalot, which are basically the calves, which Pharaoh sent to carry him. Verse 6. Okay. And a question. Okay, Rich, I see your question maybe for memory purposes or your comment. I apologize. I didn't see that when I was actually talking. So I don't know exactly what you're talking about for memory purposes. But anyway, if you happen to want to explain what you're talking about, we can talk about it. Or you can come on, man. You can come on and talk with us. Feel free. Let's see if I still have the link. Yep, here's the link. Okay. I get sidetracked really easy. So, verse 6. ويقحوا את מקניהם ואת רכושם אשר רכשו בארץ כנען ויבואו מצרימה Yaakov וכל זרעו איתו. Now here is something really cool I want to point out. And we have to go back. Let me first find the place. This is in Lech Lecha. When we go back to Lech Lecha, in the first Aliyah of Lech Lecha, we have this. Come here, Lech Lecha. Yeah. So it says in verse 5 of chapter 12 of Genesis, which is the first Aliyah of Parashath Lech Lecha, says, وَيِكَحْ Avram et Sarai ishto, وَet Lot ben Achiv, وَet kol rechusham asher rachashu, وَet hanefesh asher asu b'haran, وَيَيْتze'u ללכת ארצה כנען, وَيَבואו ארצה כנען. And it says, so Abraham took Sarah, his wife, and Lot, his nephew, and all the possessions, or all the rechush, which means the property, that they rachashu, which means they came into possession of, as well as the souls that they made in Haran. And you can say that this idea of the rechusham, asher rachashu, when you have the next phrase, وَأَتْ حَنَفِشْ أَشَرْ عَسُ بَحَرَانِ, could mean as well, or included in that rechush would be the souls. But you have the same idea here. It says, now they took their possessions. وَيِقْتَحُوا أَتْ مِقْنَيْهِمْ. Miknehem means something that you come into possession from the verb kana, which means to possess or even to purchase. Liknoth means to purchase something. And normally mikneh is talking about usually your livestock or whatever. But it could also mean your servants, because it talks about the slaves of the house of Abraham being purchased with with money, and it uses the same verb kana. And we know that at the time of the war between the kings of the east and the kings of Canaan, and when Lot was taken captive by Kedorlaomer, it says that Abraham had 318 trained men of war who were born in his house, and so he wasn't a joke. He was a very powerful guy, rich guy, and well blessed by God. And so the king that just came, these kings of the east that just came into Canaan, destroyed all the other kings of Canaan, took all of their possessions, and left. Abraham and these 318 warriors that he had went up against these kings that just defeated all the kings of Canaan, and he divided his forces against them, defeated them, and chased them as far as Damascus. Okay, and brought all the property back. So we know that at that time there was 318 men who were the trained men of war, born in the house of Abraham. And that doesn't include all the other servants that weren't specifically dedicated as soldiers. And so Yaakov is the inheritor of all this, right? Which it says when Abraham sends his servant to his brother's house to get a wife for Isaac. The servant goes there and he explains to Laban and to his father, look, Abraham's rich, got lots of slaves, lots of wealth, and he gave everything to his son Isaac. So that means Isaac inherited these men, these slaves of Abraham, especially these three. We know there were 318 men of war. That means Isaac also inherited them. He inherited that from his father, which means Yaakov, who had the birthright now, he inherited them from Yitzhak, right? What happened to these people when he goes to Egypt? Now, this is what I'm getting at with this verse. It says that they took the possessions, whatever they had, whether they acquired them through act of war or whether they purchased them with money. That's all included in Miknehem, as well as their possessions, which they came into possession of in the land of Canaan, which would include all these servants and slaves, right? So they took that and they came to Egypt, right? Yaakov and all of his seed with him. But now, when we get to the number at the beginning of the book of Shemot, it says only 70 people of the Israelites went to Egypt. What happened to all these slaves? What happened to these 318 men, and perhaps maybe their children if they had had children? That's a lot of people to just abandon in Canaan. And I always wondered, did they bring them too? Perhaps these are a part of the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude that came up with Egypt, or with the Israelites out of Egypt. Maybe they're included in that. But that's always just a question I've had. So, verse 7. Banav uvenei vanav ito venofav ובנות בניו וכל זרעו הביא איתו מצרימה. And his sons, the sons of his sons with him, his daughters and the daughters of his daughters, or the daughters of his sons, and all of his seed, they brought with him to Egypt. Okay. So we are now in, just for those of you joining us, we're in Genesis 46, and we're now on verse 8. We're starting verse 8. We might finish this today. Verse 8. وَأَيْلَي شموت بني إسرائيل هبائيم מצרימה يعقوب ובניו بخور يعقوب رeuven. And these are the names of the sons of Israel, the ones who entered Egypt. Yaakov and his sons. The firstborn of Yaakov is Reuben. Uvenei Reuven, Chanoch, Palu, Hitzron, Karmi. And the sons of Reuben are Chanoch, Palu, Hitzron, and Karmi. Uvenei Shimeon, and the sons of Simeon, Yemuel, and Yamin, and Ohad, and Yakin, and Sohar, and Shaul, the son of the Canaanite, was Shaul ben Hakinaani. 11. Uvene Lewi, Gershon, Kehat Umerari. And the sons of Levi, Gershon, Kehath, and Merari. Of course, Kehath is the line of Moses and Aaron. Uvene Yehuda, Air, وأونان, وشلاح, وفارس, وزارح, ويموث, عير, وأونان بأرض كنعان, ويحيى بني فارس, حدسرون, وحمود. And the sons of Judah are Er and Onan, Shelah, Peretz, and Zara. Now Er and Onan died in the land of Canaan, and the sons of Peretz were Hetzron and Hamul. Verse 13. Uvene Yisachar, Tola, Ufua, Yov, Shimron. And the sons of Issachar were Tola, Pua, Yov, and Shimron. Verse 14. Uvene Zebulun, Sered Elon Yahaleel. And the sons of Zebulun were Sered, Elon, and Yahdeel. Eile bnei Leah asher yalada leYaakov bipadan Aram ואת דינה ביתו כל נפש בניו ובנותיו 33. These are the sons of Leah, which she gave birth to Yaakov in Padan Aram, which means they were Arameans by birth, and also Dinah, her daughter. All the persons Kul Nefesh Banav Ubenothav, and all the persons of his sons and daughters were Shaloshim Shalosh were 33. Uvnei Gad, Sifyon, Hagi, Shuni, Bone, Airi, Arodi, Ar Eli. And the sons of Gad, Sifyon, and Hagi, Shuni, Itzbon, Eri, Arodi, and Ar Eli, or the sons of Gad. Ubnei Asher, Yimna, Yishwa, Yishwi, Uveri'ah, Serach, Achotham. Ubnei Veri'ah, Cheber, Umalkiel. And the sons of Asher were Yimna, Yishwa, Yishwi, Beriah, Serach, their sister, and the sons of Beriah were Heber and Malkiel. Now we're on 18. Eile b'nei Zilpah asher Nathan Lavan le'Leah beto, v'teled et Eile leYaakov sheish itzrei nafesh. And these are the sons of Zilpah, which Lavan gave to Leah, his daughter, and she gave birth to these for Yaakov, 16 persons. Sheish Esrei Nafish, 16 persons. 19. Bnei Rachel, Eshet Yaakov, Yosef Ubenyamin. And the sons of Rachel, the wife of Yaakov, are Yosef and Benjamin. Now it's interesting here. Now we know that Leah, Zilpah, and Bilhah were all wives of Yaakov. But the only one mentioned here as the wife of Yaakov is Rachel. I just noticed that, and interesting. Verse 20. ويولد ليوسف بإرث مصرين أشر يلد له أسناث بت بوتيفرا كهين أون et Menashe et Ephraim. And for Joseph was born in the land of Egypt, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, gave birth to him, who was, by the way, the Kohen of On, Menashe, as well as Ephraim. Uvnei Binyamin, Bela, wa Vecher, wa Ashbel, Gera, wa Naaman, Echi, wa Rosh, Mupim, wa Hopim, wa Arad.
May I have a question, dear
Yeah.
Chacham? The name in verse 20, and to Joseph were born in the land of Egypt, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar.
Yeah.
I'm sure that in the German translation, she is called Asmat. What is the meaning of this word Asenath?
That is actually an Egyptian name. What it actually means, no one knows.
Oh, okay.
It's a guess. You can guess all you want, but to get a definite answer, I don't know, and I'm not sure if anybody knows. But that is just an Egyptian name.
But it is written Asenath, or not Asmat with a mim.
No, it's written with a noon. This is Senath.
Okay.
Let's see where I was now. Oh, I think I was on 21.
Verse 20.
No, verse 20.
We have read verse 20, so now 21. You're right.
Okay. So verse 21, the translation, and the sons of Benjamin were Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Echi, Rosh, Mupim, Hupim, and Ard. It's an interesting name, Ard. In fact, I know a bunch of people who has a surname as Ard, A-R-D.
Okay.
Okay, verse 22. Eile b'nei Rachel asher yulad li'Yaakov kul nefesh arba'a asar. And these are the sons of Rachel, which were born to Yaakov. All the souls, or all the people, were 14. Verse 23. Uvnei Dan, Chushim, Uvnei Naphtali, Yachziel, Waguni, Wayetzer, Washilam. And the sons of Dan were he only had one, was Chushim. And the sons of Naphtali were Yachziel, Guni, Yetzer, and Shilam. So there's where the Goonies come from, if anybody remembers that movie, The Goonies. They're Israelites, aren't they? Okay. Verse 25. Ele b'nei Vilha asher Nathan Lavan lerachel beto וteled et Ele liYaakov kol nefesh shiv'ah. These are the sons of Bilhah, which Lavan gave to Rachel, his daughter, and she gave birth to these for Yaakov, each person being 7 in all. Kul hanefesh haba'a liYaakov mitzrayma yotzei Yericho min levad nashei b'nei Yaakov kul nefesh shishim washesh. And all the persons that were coming, Haba'a Yaakov, coming to Yaakov or with Yaakov to Egypt, coming out of his loins, besides the wives of the sons of Yaakov, each person being 66. So there are 66. Uven Yosef Asher Yulad Lo b'Mitzrayim Nefesh Shinayim. كل هالنفش لبيت يعقوب هباء مصريما شبعيم. And so the sons of Joseph, which was born to him in Egypt, were 2 souls, 2 peoples. And so all the souls of the house of Yaakov, which came to Egypt, were 70. So let me look. There's no questions. Okay, so we'll keep going. So now we are beginning on the 6th aliyah. So we have just this one and one more to go. We're done with this parasha. Yep. وإت يهوذا شلح לפניו אל יוסף להורד לפני גושנה ויבואו ארצה גושן. And so he sent Judah before him to Joseph להורד לפני להורד. That's interesting. The horot is normally used for when you explain Torah. The horot. Here it means to show. So it says, and so he sent Judah before him to Joseph to show, or to instruct before him, to Goshen, and so they came to the land of Goshen. So basically, to instruct them how to get to Goshen is what he's talking about. ويأسر يوسف مركبته ويعل لقراء يسرائيل أبيه غوشنا ويرى إلى ويبول على صورة ويفق على صورة أود. And so Joseph Yosef, which literally means he bound his chariot, which means he hitched it, or however you want to say it. He hooked it up to the horse or whatever it was that was carrying it. And he went up to meet Israel, his father, at Goshen. Yera Elav, and he appeared to him, and he fell upon his neck, and he wept upon his neck also. Verse 30. ויאמר ישראל אל יוסף אמות הפעם אחרי ראותי את פניך כי עודך חי. And so Yisrael said to Joseph, this time I can die. Now I can die. After I've seen your face, because you, or that you are still alive. Verse 31. ويومر يوسف الإخاء والبيت أبي إعلي وأجيد لفرعون وأمر إله أخاي وبيت أبي أشر بأرض كنعان باءوا إلي. And so Joseph said to his brothers and to the house of his father, I'm going to go up and I'm going to inform Pharaoh, and I will say to him, my brothers and the house of my father, which were in the land of Canaan, they have come to me. Verse 32, وَهَأَنَشِيم وَرُعِسَون, and the men are shepherds of sheep. כי אנשי מקנה היו וצאנם ובקרם וכל אשר להם הביאו. Because they are men of mikne, which means, like I said, possessions. Normally it's talking about livestock, because they are men of livestock, and their flocks and herds and all that they have brought. Verse 33. وهيا كي يقرأ لكم پرعو وأما ما معسيكم. And so when Pharaoh calls to you and he says, what is your occupation? What do you do? 34. وأمرتم أنا شمقني هيو عبديخ من نعرين وأدعت جمع نحن جمع أبوتينو بعفور تشوفوا بأرض غوشن كي ثوابت مترايم كل رأيتون. Then you shall say, we are men of livestock. Your servants are men of livestock from our youth even until now. And also we and our fathers, and because of that, Teshuv be Eretz Goshen. And because of that, Tesha Vu means to dwell in the land of Goshen, because it is a To'ava is a hateful thing to the Egyptians. Any shepherd of sheep is a To'ava. It means, it comes from Ta'av, which means to hate something. And so it means a despicable or a hateful thing, or I think they translate it as an abomination. So I have a question finally. Nicola Rudier says, isn't it remarkable that there are so many sons and only one or two daughters? You know, I've always thought that really funny, but we don't know that there were only one or two daughters. We know only one or two daughters were mentioned, but it's always interesting that we see the phrase "his daughters" is always in the plural, and so that could be more than those actually named. But yeah, that's always interesting that there were so few women born to the Israelites, and they had so many more sons. So anyway, getting back to verse 23, he says, Teshavu be'aretz Goshen, so that you will live. Now this is Yosef speaking to his brothers, so that you can live in the land of Goshen, because being a shepherd is a despicable thing to the Egyptian. Now we are in 47. We have 27 more verses. So 47. ויבוא יוסף ויגיד לפרעה ויאמר אבי ואחי וצאנם ובקרם וכל אשר להם באו מארץ כנען והנם בארץ Goshen. And so Joseph went and he informed Pharaoh, and he said, my father and brothers and their flocks and herds and all that they have come from the land of Canaan, and behold, they are now in the land of Goshen. ומכסה אחיו לקח 5 אנשים ויצרם לפני פרעה and of his brother, or of the, usually mikse, kise means the extremities, but basically it means of his brothers. He took 5 men, and he presented them to Pharaoh. And that, when you talk about introductions, you use that same word, netzach, in modern Hebrew. Verse 2, ויאמר פרעה אל אחיו מה מעשיכם ויאמרו אל פרעה רועי צאן עבדיך גם אנחנו גם אבותינו. And so Pharaoh said to his brothers, what is your occupation? And they said to Pharaoh, shepherds of sheep are your servants. Your servants are shepherds of sheep, or shepherds of flocks. Us as well as our fathers. ويمر إل فارعو لغر بأرض بانو كي إن مرعي لتسون أشر لعبديخ كي خفيت هرعا بأرض كنائن وعتا يشبونا عبديخ بأرض Goshen. And so they said to Pharaoh to reside in the land. We have come, because there's no mirai, which means pasturage, places to take the livestock out to eat, to pasture, to be a roy. Now, it is interesting that when it talks about the dream of Pharaoh, and he saw those cows, those good, healthy cows, it says they were pasturing. They use the word tir'inna. They were pasturing. This is from the same verb, to be a shepherd, on the achu, which is the reed plants on the edge of the river.
There is another question from Nicola Rudia. Would you say that Egyptians worshipped sheep, goats in the same way that Hindus worship cows? In other words, you can keep them for milk but not for meat?
I have no idea. That's a good question. As far as the Egyptian dietary laws and what they ate, what they didn't eat, that I don't know. I've looked through some of the Egyptian religious practices, and I don't really know everything. I know a few little tidbits, but I've tried learning Egyptian hieroglyphs. I can pretty much read some of it. And what I find interesting when you talk about that is we have in the inscriptions. In fact, this is here in my first book here. Let me find this. So in this inscription there in Egypt, this is a inscription of a priest. Okay, he was the chief of the priests of Pharaoh, and his name is Merari, which is interesting because that's actually one of the names of the sons of Levi, is Merari. But he was as a priest, he was over the cattle. It says he was the Sa'utenute, which means the guardian of the temple cattle. So what they actually did with these animals in the temple, I'm not exactly sure, but we know that they had cattle in their religious practices. Whether they sacrificed them or what they did with them, I couldn't tell you. But if you want, I'll go and try to find out. And look, okay, here's Melech. I just saw him. Shabbat Shalom, Melech. I just saw you. How long you been there?
Just a minute or so.
Okay.
Yep.
But you know anything about the Egyptian ritual sacrifices?
Egyptian ritual sacrifices? No, can't say I do.
I don't either. The question was about how they viewed their sheep and goats and stuff like that.
But
well, I guess the context is that that's why the Israelites were placed in Goshen, right? It's because sheep were considered an abomination. It says.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. But we do know that they had cows. That's what I was just reading about in my Egyptian grammar. We have an inscription about a guy named Merari. As a matter of fact, he's a temple priest. He's one of the high priests of the temple, and he was also a guardian of the temple cattle. So we know they had cattle.
Okay.
So okay, we are in 47.
All right.
And
we're in what chapter?
Chapter 47. And I think I just read verse 4. So I just read verse 4.
Hello?
Yep. I hear you. Fine.
I don't know What happened?
So I just read verse 4. You're probably right, Nicola.
We will finish.
Yep.
So where are we? I'm a
We're
little
in
bit under
40.
the weather this week, so forgive me, but
That's no
I'll try my
problem.
best.
We're in chapter 47,
A little bit
and I
cold.
just
Yeah,
read
all right.
verse 4.
47:4. All right, hold on
Yep.
a second. Let me open it up.
And so I'm just going to finish this last part of 4. We have come to live or to reside in the land because there's no pasturage for the flocks, which belong to your servants, because the famine has become great in the land of Canaan. So now then, allow your servants to live or to reside in the land of Goshen.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're on verse 5.
Mm-hmm.
ויאמר פרעה אל יוסף לאמור, אביך ואחיך באו אליך. And so Pharaoh says to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 6. ארץ מצרים לפניך היא, במיטב הארץ, הושב את אביך ואת אחיך, ישבו בארץ גושן, ואם ידעת, ויש בם אנשי חיל. This is important. אנשי חיל. ושמתם שרי מחנה על אשר לי. Now, this is really important because we talked before about the Chanik, which were in the house of Abraham. There was 318 of these guys who were born in his house, and the word Chanik, although it sounds like Chanak, which is where you get dedication, that's actually an Egyptian term which talks about mercenaries. And so in the Egyptian, when you say Chanik, it's talking about mercenaries. But anyway, these were born in his house, and these were the 318 men that he took and chased Kedorlaomer and the kings that came with him that just conquered the kings of Canaan and took all their possessions. So we had 318 men, so they were men of war. Now, what happened to these men, we're not really sure. But it's interesting, the statement that Pharaoh makes about these Israelites. So evidently these guys were pretty well known to not be a joke when it comes to military tactics or whatever.
Well, I don't think that's what's going on there at all. I think that what we have here is, well, he says, Yosef lemor, verse 6. Eretz Mitzrayim lefanecha hi meitav haaretz oshev את אביך ואת אחיך ישבו בארץ גושן ואם ידעת ויש בם אנשי חיל ושמתם שרי מקנה על אשר לי. So אנשי חיל in this case just means strong men or capable men.
Capable men, right?
And he's asking if there are any, because Yaakov just told them that they're roe tzon and roe mikneh, right? That they're shepherds and cowboys, and so now he's saying, well, if you have any capable men that you could put over my cattle, then please let me know.
Yeah, well, we have to keep in mind as well that those are the only cattle in the land of Egypt. During the first 2 years of the famine, Joseph had bought for grain all of the cattle of the Egyptians,
Right?
all of the flock or the mikneh, all of the mikneh of Egypt belonged now to Pharaoh.
Right.
Also, their lands. So all of the lands of the Egyptians was also sold, and then at the very end, they sold themselves into slavery so they
That's
can
right.
have food. So prior to this time, each Egyptian lord basically was the lord of his own property.
Sure.
And we know even in the inscriptions that there's something happened. The Egyptologists they can't bring themselves to say it was because of this famine that within a few years all of Egypt became owned by the pharaoh. But before that, they were independent landowners. But
Well, it's kind of
the
like
famine
if I
comes.
make it a little. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right, and so the only thing that Joseph did was he accepted the priest. Now he married into the priesthood of Egypt. They lived in Goshen. That was the only land that was not sold, that didn't belong to Pharaoh, and they were the only ones who were not under a 20% tax. Everyone else had this 20% or this fifth tax, and it's interesting that the priest in Goshen, who lived in Goshen, were provided and paid from the treasury of Pharaoh. This is what we read in the Torah.
Okay,
And
that's
so
all fine and
everything.
dandy, but that's not what. This verse is talking about something a little bit different. But
Okay.
what I wanted to say was
Mm.
that I cannot help but thinking, and I've for months now I've had this thought going through my head that what happened in Egypt is now exactly what's happening in the United States of America. So basically, here you had a famine, and that famine basically completely impoverished, the middle class, so to speak, and they ended up selling, as you said, their cattle, eventually their land, and eventually their very selves to the government. And that's exactly what's happening in the United States right now. Is you have this crisis, this fake crisis, actually, because COVID is just not a very dangerous disease at all. It's just a complete hoax,
It's a
But
rhinovirus.
it's basically eradicating, eviscerating the middle class, and basically they're losing their businesses. They're going to be losing their houses as soon as the moratorium on evictions stops. They've lost a lot of their money, and they're basically being, basically all of their possessions and their land and everything else they owned is basically being taken over by either the very rich or the state itself or the banks, and they're just going to be left as like an impoverished, enslaved class. And of course, in the United States, this is all explicitly by design, by those who want to destroy that country. So I hope there's a revolution there. Hopefully there will be, but I don't know if there will be or not. But it would be nice. There certainly should be one. But at any rate, I can't
What
help
would you want it to do?
constantly seeing the comparisons between what's going on in the United States now and what went on in Egypt at that time.
Yep. What do you want the revolution to accomplish in America?
Well, honestly, I'd like it to restore America to the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see a right-wing revolution restore America to the way it was. An armed revolution. And I'd like to see lots of guillotines dragged out and and lots of gallows and all that kind of stuff. And the right wing needs to take care of business. That's what I'd like to see. Ultimately, what would really be nice is if they were to cast off their Christianity and adopt Yehovah worship as their religion. I don't know if that's going to happen, but you never know. Crises do lead to interesting things.
Yeah, one can hope.
We'll see what happens. Right now, it seems that I'm not even there, so I don't have any say in this. But it seems like the right wing is, I'm glad I'm not there either. The right wing seems to be pretty brain dead at this point. I don't know if they're going to do anything. They talk a lot, but they're not doing anything. But it seems like they're really getting pushed to the edge right now. It might be only a matter of time. We shall see.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Where were we? Verse 6, was it? No.
Yeah, verse 6.
Verse 6.
Mm-hmm.
So we read that. Verse 7 then.
Mm-hmm.
ويفي يوسف את יעקב אבי ויעמידהו לפני פרעה ויברך יעקב את פרעה. Now this is an interesting thing too. I want to make a comment when I get through translating it. And so Joseph brought his father Yaakov, and he's presented him to Pharaoh, and Yaakov blessed Pharaoh. He said,
Right.
"Vayavarech Yaakov et Pharaoh." Now, this is the head of the Israelite patriarchy at the time, and he blessed a foreign ruler. Now, we see the same thing in the example of Abraham when he bought Hebron. He pretty much did something similar. It doesn't say I don't think he blessed them, but it says he submitted himself before them. And we have, I think it's in the prophet Jeremiah. Now, God sent the Israelites into captivity throughout the different parts that he sent them to. But he said, seek peace for the place where you were sent in captivity, and pray for it, because the success or the blessing, I can't remember exactly how it's put, of that place is actually yours as well. So as long as that place does well, then you'll do well, is basically what's being said. And so here you have Yaakov, who his whole family has been saved, and one of his younger sons is placed as the Lord over all of Egypt. And they went from, I don't know if you could say rags, but they went from being in a famine to being pretty much in the royal house. And so he blessed him. So I just want to make a point that it's not really always bad to pray for and bless the ruling class of a country and hope that they aren't so wicked. Reminds me of you ever seen Fiddler on the Roof?
Sure. Of course.
There's a part, one of my favorite parts in the movie. The rabbi, the old rabbi,
Sure, yeah,
coming out.
famous. Yeah,
he comes
I won't
out.
ruin the punchline for you, but yeah.
Huh?
I won't ruin the punchline for you, but I know exactly what you're gonna say.
Yeah. So all the young men come up and ask him, says, "Rabbi, is there a blessing for the Tsar?" I think it was for the Tsar.
Right.
And he says, "Naturally." Yeah. He says, "May the Lord bless and keep him far away from us."
Exactly.
But anyway.
But in all seriousness, it is. I think it's Jewish law that you're supposed to pray for the. I think they based it on that verse that you mentioned from Jeremiah, but I think it's actually rabbinical law that you have to pray for the welfare of the city you're in, or the government that you're under. And in fact, in all of the I don't know about all, but many of the, I think all, maybe many of the Jewish, the rabbinical sitters, Sidurim, they have as part of the Shabbat prayer, the prayer for the government, or the prayer for the leaders of the government. And so it'll actually say, in like an American prayer book, it'll say something like in the middle, I can't remember where in the prayer session, but it'll say something like, please bless the United States of America and its leaders, and make them be wise and make wise decisions, and protect the safety of this country, and blah blah blah. I'd have to find the exact prayer, but it is in most, maybe all rabbinical sitters.
That's interesting.
And it's not only in America. If you look at old Sidurim, like I remember once seeing one, I think it was from Russia, and it said, there was a prayer for the Tsar.
Yeah, no, pretty cool.
You know.
But going back to the example of Abraham, when it comes to Pharaoh, was it Pharaoh or was it Avimelech? I think it was Avimelech.
Mm-hmm.
Because he went to Pharaoh, then he goes to Avimelech, pulled the same thing, and it says his whole house was plagued, and so God tells him in a vision, hey, go to Abraham, who's the prophet, and he'll pray for you. So praying for foreign dignitaries, was a practice even from the time of Abraham.
Mm-hmm. Well, here it is: Jewish prayers for the United States government. Let's see here. Studies. Oh, that's an article. How to pray for Donald Trump. Pray for the government. No, I actually pray for Donald Trump on a regular basis. I do. I mentioned it even last night in my Shabbat prayer. We should pray for President-elect Donald Trump, James Samaria, Jewish leaders pray for Trump and Hebron. Anyway, there in the liturgy there is a prayer for for the government of the country you're living in. So, but what was I going to say? I forgot what I was going to say. I guess I wasn't going to say. I don't know. All right, Yaakov Yam Right. Oh yeah. So, I mean, why would Pharaoh even want a prayer from this guy Yaakov? And so I guess it's possible to speculate that Pharaoh knew that this was a very important man of God. Just as Avimelech found out with with Abraham and with Isaac, right?
This family's terrible. They're killing me.
Right. That is, yeah. Then I always get the two stories mixed up. But with Abraham, I guess it was came to him in a dream or something. I can't remember. Maybe both times it was in a dream. I don't remember. No, I think the first time was in a dream.
The first time was in a dream. The second time he was peeping out the window.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. At any rate.
Well, it doesn't actually say he was peeping out the window, does it? It might have. Anyway.
At any rate, I would assume that Pharaoh somehow knew that Yaakov was a prophet, or an important man of God, or so he's happy to receive, or he's asking maybe even for a blessing from Jacob, because I doubt he would want to, I doubt he asked for or received a blessing from everyone who came to visit him,
Yeah, I don't know. I know it mentions it twice in this context here. It says, so the next verse is, وَيَوْمَ پَرَعُوا إِلْ يَعْقُوبَ كَمَّا يَمَيْشِنَي خَيَيْخَ. And so Pharaoh asked Yaakov, or he says to Yaakov, how old are you, basically? Literally, it says, how many are the days of your life? Basically, how old are you? ويومر يعقوب إلى פרעה ימי שני מגורי 300 שנה מאת ורעים היו ימי שני חיי ולא השאירו את ימי שני חיי אבותיי בימי מגוריהם. So he said, and Yaakov says to Pharaoh, the days of my pilgrimage, no, the days of my dwelling here are 130 years. Few and terrible were the days of my life, and the days of my life hasn't even overtaken the days of my fathers and the days of their residents, talking about in this life.
Right. The days of their life, yeah.
Yep. And then it says again. So here's the second time. وَيَvَارِخْ يَعْقُوب et Para'o وَيَتَيْ مِلِبْتَنَيْ Para'o. And so Yaakov blessed Pharaoh, and he left out from Pharaoh's presence. So there
Mhm.
you have it, twice in the same context. It says he blessed him once, and then it says he blessed him again. Whether it's the same, talking about the same time or not, that's you can yes or no. But it's just interesting that's mentioned twice.
Yep.
So verse 11. Now we're starting actually on the last aliyah. So we got a half hour since the last aliyah. So verse 11. ויושב יוסף את אביו ואת אחיו וייתן להם אחוזה בארץ מצרים במיטב הארץ בארץ רעמסס כאשר סיwa פרעה. So Yosef settled, I guess you could say that, his father and his brothers, and he gave to them a possession in the land of Egypt, and the goodness of the land in the land of Ramses, which, or according to what or how Pharaoh commanded. Now, this is interesting too, because we know they were in Goshen. That's wherever it was. They were in Goshen. Now it says it's the land of Ramses. Now, Ramses, or whatever, wasn't around at this time. And this is one of the instances. This is also used by some of the documentary hypothesis
Right.
people to say, well, this is all bogus because at the time of Ramses there were no Israelites there. There were even no Hyksos or any kind of Asiatic people there. So that means this story is all garbage.
Right.
But the point is that we see many times the names of certain places. Now we know wherever this land of Ramses is actually the land of Goshen. And today it's called, what's the name of that thing? A virus or something.
What's that?
A virus or a virus or
What?
Avira. It's name of the city there in the land of Goshen. It was a German archaeologist who actually discovered it, and he's been going there almost every off season when it's not flooded, and doing the digging. And the weird thing about it is that he has to dig it out and then bury it every time because they make him bury everything. They can't leave it out. But he's actually discovered what he is claiming to probably be a Canaanite settlement, and you have a lot of biblical archaeologists saying this is probably the house of Yaakov and his 12 in the 12 sons, because there's 11 graves in this settlement, and the one who they claim is Joseph has been vandalized, and the only thing that was taken were the bones, whatever was in the ossuary. And they said that's actually fits the story because that's all they took was the bones of Joseph.
Right. Who knows?
Well, usually when tombs are vandalized, the bones aren't taken, but the
Right.
gold and precious stuff is taken.
Right.
Whereas that stuff was left, and only the bones were missing.
Yeah, I hear you. Maybe. Yeah, so this Ramses, we're assuming Ramses is either in Goshen or part of Goshen, or is a synonym for Goshen or something along those lines, right?
Well, we know at the beginning of this narrative here, this part, they're asking him to go live in the land of Goshen.
Right.
And Pharaoh said, here is the best part of the land. It's the land of Goshen. Go live there. And now it says, here it says the same thing. The best part of the land of Ramses.
Right. And we also know from later on that they lived in Goshen. Right, it's mentioned many times, like during the plagues. And we also know that the Israelites, when they built the two Araya, what it was called again, Miskanot or something like that. They usually translate storage cities. That they were, or the two names of those cities were Ramses and Pitom.
Yep.
So I guess they built them in Goshen.
They built they built that. Now, also, it's interesting too that this is exactly what Joseph built when it says he built these cities. He's built these storage cities for the grain, and we see that even in the time of the Israelite, the later, in the narrative of the Exodus, they were still building these storage cities for the grain.
Does it use the same word?
Yeah, I believe so.
Really? Wait, so where does it say that Joseph built the storage cities?
Let me get back to it. WayYigash, Keats. It's right here somewhere. ويذكر فأروه عشان سافنات يوسف شمال ويأتي يوسف من فرعون ويعبر بكل اسمه وتعس عاش
So according to Robert Alter, what's going on with the naming it, by the way, Ramses is just like it's just from Dan to Beersheba. It's kind of an anachronism based on when the Torah was written, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying, Gal? Okay, let me let you find out.
Okay. Oh yeah, it just basically says it doesn't use the word. It just says let it be gathered in cities, bi'arim.
Okay. But I'm just going to read what Robert Alter says. Medieval and modern commentators agree that this designation, meaning Ramses, is a synonym for Goshen. The term looks like an anachronism because Ramses is a city later built with Israelite slave labor. Perhaps its use here is intended to foreshadow the future oppression. In other words, like when it says, when the Torah speaks about from Dan to Beersheba, before there ever was a Dan or before I'm sorry, before Dan had ever occupied, the land, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by the time the Torah was written, Ramses was already a known place, but maybe it hadn't existed then. It was only when the Israelites built it or whatever.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm getting at there. These storage cities, I think, were the same thing. That's what Joseph began to build and collect all this stuff. And I think that's what they were probably doing later. I can't prove it, but
maybe
that's just a heck of a guess.
That is a heck of a guess.
So where are we now?
So we are. Where are we?
I think we're on verse 12.
Uh,
ויכלכל יוסף את אביו ואת אחיו ואת כל בית אביו לחם לפני הטף.
mhm.
And so Joseph provided for his father and his brothers, and also the house of his father, lechem, according to the hataf, which would be hataf is normally their families.
Top means babies, the toddlers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you could translate that as lechem lefi hataf. You could translate that as literally into the mouths of the babies. So he was excuse me. So he's providing food for all of his father's house directly into the mouths of the children. Is one possible translation, I would say. You know.
Mm-hmm. So verse 13. ولحم אין בכל הארץ, כי כבד הרעב מאוד, ותלה ארץ מצרים וארץ כנען מפני הרעב. And so there was no land in all of there was no bread in all of the land, because the famine had become very great. And the land of Egypt, as well as the land of Canaan, fainted, because of the famine. Verse 14.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that here we have a famine that's in all of the land, all of the earth, right? In b'chol haaretz, right? It harkens back to the flood, the Noah flood, where it covered the entire world, supposedly. But it says, my point is that here the word haaretz is being used clearly locally, because we're not talking about the entire world, right? I mean, in South America, I don't think there was a famine, right?
No.
So it's possible that the flood, when it says it covered the entire world, it's not talking about the entire world. It's talking about the local area.
Well, yeah, I've heard that too, and it's kind of tough, when you have, and I have to admit, this is something I've always said. We have what's called hyperbole in the text, and so when you talk about giants and stuff like that, yeah, I'm pretty sure they were really tall people. There's tall people today.
Well, it says we know exactly how large Og's bed was, or was it Sichon's bed?
Yeah, but just because the bed's that long, just because the bed's that long, don't mean you know exactly how long the person was. But the point
have been longer than that bed, right? Unless he curled up in it.
My bed's longer than I am. I'm not the same length as my bed.
No,
what
I'm saying is that
my feet don't hang off the end.
The size of Og's bed, or was it Sichon's bed, would give an upper limit on his height, right? Because the bed is going to be longer than he is.
Well, that's what I'm saying. My feet wouldn't hang off the end of. I'm not going to get a bed, especially if I'm a king, that my feet's going to hang off the end of.
Right. So I think Sichon's feet didn't hang off the head of his bed either. My point is that we know how big the bed was. We know at the most how big Sichon was.
Well, I'm just saying, I have room from my feet to the bottom of my bed. Just because the bed is a certain length, we know he isn't going to be taller than that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but we don't know exactly how tall he was from the bed. We know how tall he might have been. But the point I'm getting at is they said that they looked like grasshoppers in the sight of these tall people. And it also says that they had fortified walls up into the heavens and went up into the heavens. Right. And we know that that's not actually true. They didn't have walls that went up into space.
Sure. Obviously.
And it just is a way of saying, hey, they were fortified cities, and they're probably more than we could handle, is basically what they're talking about.
Well, in
And
that case, also have to
so
remember it was the Israelites who were giving this report, and they were freaked out by the whole thing. They were scared,
yeah,
and they were also trying to to make an impression of like how how overwhelmed or how outnumbered they felt in the particular case of the spies. So they were giving this, they were obviously exaggerating their language for effect to emphasize how they felt. We felt like
yeah,
grasshoppers. These fortified cities were up to the, their walls were up to the heavens. That's what they felt. They felt completely overwhelmed and
yeah,
overpowered or out outstrength by these. That's not a word. I'll make one up. Outstrength by these. By the inhabitants of these lands.
yeah. And so the point I'm getting at is we have hyperbole, and it doesn't always have to be taken literally.
Sure.
Just like it says in the blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob about the descendants being like the stars of heaven
Sure.
that nobody can count. But yet, when we see Moses take account of at least a certain amount of them, and he said the number of the Israelites were 600,000 men of war, and Moses says specifically, God has made you like the stars of heaven as you are today. So,
Right.
That just means you're a big number,
Sure.
and it doesn't
Obviously.
necessarily mean that you can't count, that no one can count that high or whatever. It just doesn't have to be taken always literally. And so when you look at the flood idea and this famine idea, we look at verses in the story of the flood about how all the high hills were covered, and it could have just meant that the area was completely engulfed in water, whatever area it happened to be, and that it doesn't necessarily have to mean that all of the hills, including the Himalayas or whatever, were covered with water up to 4 or 5 cubits, whatever that was.
Well, we kind of do have a problem here with the flood, because if the flood was only covered a local area, then not everybody in the earth died. Then it wasn't only Noah and his family who survived, right? If the earth doesn't cover the Himalayas, there
It
were
just
people
says they're the only ones that survived the flood, which means of all the people that were destroyed in the flood, they were the only ones that survived. So if you want to take that route, there's ways to do it.
Well, then you're
I don't
saying
know.
something quite radical, which is that you don't believe that Noah and his family were the only ones left on the earth after the flood was over.
Yeah, I don't know if I would
And then,
agree
if
with that.
so, where are all those other descendants? Why are they not mentioned? Maybe because they're not ancestors of Abraham. I mean, were there people in South America at that time? Were there people in the Himalayas at the time, in China, that weren't affected by the flood?
Whatever it was, we know that just from the archaeology and genetic testing, every human being alive descended from one person.
Sure.
And actually, they descended from two people. It was one woman and one man, period. Now, they talk about the vastly different amount of years in between them.
Right.
But, that's neither here nor there.
Right.
The point is, whatever happened, we know, according to archaeology, that humans had a big population explosion, and then it had a bottleneck where humanity almost went extinct. They talk about that.
Sure.
And whatever happened in that bottleneck, that's where these two people came about that everybody alive today descended from.
Yeah, what do they call them? Mitochondrial Adam and mitochondrial Eve or something?
Yeah. So you have chromosome Adam or mitochondrial Eve.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I don't know. And
that's a weird name for a person. It's like, hi, nice to meet you. My name is Chromosomal Adam.
Well, you have some people who talk about it, and they say that there's there's actually 4 different lines on the female. They all descend from the same woman, but the difference is that all the men at the time descended from the same paternal line. It didn't branch out. But then you had 4 distinct maternal lines. Although they still all descended from the same original woman, by the time the rest of humans started branching out, those maternal lines were already distinct.
Yeah, but have they been able to date mitochondrial Adam and mitochondrial Eve?
That's a big debate. There's something
Adam
called
and mitochondrial Eve.
There's something called the mitochondrial clock. Now, according to one group, they say that you can't go back any further based upon how mitochondria is earlier than 9 to 10,000 years. That's it. So the Y chromosome is actually smaller than the mitochondrial DNA. And they're saying, how can you have a Y chromosome that's supposed to be so many hundreds of thousands of years older than the oldest mitochondria? It doesn't work.
Okay.
It's like, where did the mitochondria come from for the hundreds of thousands of years between? Doesn't work. But anyway, because there's no different mitochondrial line. There's only one. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's basically really off topic.
Sure.
So,
okay.
Verse 13. Verse 13. ويلقت يوسف את כל הכסף הנמצא בארץ מצרים ובארץ כנען בשבר אשר הם שוברים ויביא יוסף את הכסף בית פרעה. And so it says Joseph collected all of the money that was found in the land of Egypt and also in the land of Canaan for the shever, which he was shovarim, was talking about the selling of the grain that they were selling. And Joseph brought the money into the house of Pharaoh.
I'm sure he took his cut, like any good Jew.
Yeah. 15. ويتم הכסף מארץ מצרים ומארץ כנען ויתום הכסף מארץ מצרים ומארץ כנען ויבואו כל מצרים אל יוסף לאמור הבה לנו לחם ולמה נמות נגדך כי אפס כסף. And so the money in the land of Egypt was basically finished. It was done. It was completed. And also in the land of Canaan. And so all of Egypt came to Pharaoh saying, hey, bring us some bread, some food. Why should we die in your presence? Because there is no more money.
Right. And by the way, afes, which means like to run out of or to cease to exist or something like that, is the modern word. There was no word for zero in ancient Hebrew, but in modern Hebrew, the word for zero is efes.
Mm-hmm. Verse 17. وَيَبِيءُ at
Mechanihem. Verse 16.
Oh, did I miss one? Okay. وَيَوْمَرْ يوسف هَبُوا مِخْدَيْكُمْ وَإِتْنَا لَكُمْ بِمِخْنَيْكُمْ im afes kasef. And so Yosef says, bring your possessions or your basically this is talking about your livestock, and I will give to you for your livestock if there is no more money.
So Yosef basically, with his foresight or with his ability to dream, basically made Pharaoh rich
Mm-hmm.
by telling him to save up all the money.
Yeah.
And ever since then has started the glorious tradition of Jews being financial advisors to kings.
Money changers.
No, financial advisors to kings.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first one. Yeah, there's none before that. And but in all honesty, I mean, it's almost like you always you wish you had a prophet or a crystal ball or something to tell you what the lottery numbers are going to be tomorrow, and then you'll bet them. This is kind of exactly what Yosef did for Pharaoh, right? He basically used prophecy in a certain sense or dream interpretation to give Pharaoh financial advice based on what's going to happen, and Pharaoh acted on that financial advice and became a multi-zillionaire. Became the Jeff Bezos of his own time.
Yep. So verse 17. ويبيئوا את מכניהם אל יוסף وייתן להם יוסף לחם בסוסים ובמקנה הצאן ובמקנה הבקר ובחמורים וינחלם בלחם בכל מקניהם בשנה ההיא. And so they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave to them bread in exchange for horses and their livestock of the flocks and the livestock of the herds, and also the asses.
Mm-hmm.
And so he provided them bread for all of their possessions in that year.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, when I say for their possessions, it means against it. So they traded all of their livestock at this point.
Right.
The money is now spent, so now they're bringing all of their livestock. So in that year, they gave their livestock.
Yep. One second. So that word Yinahalem, how would you translate that there? Because it's Linahel means to lead, or I guess dispossess them.
Yeah, that's
he led away all their livestock.
Yeah, basically he
see how Mr. Robert Alter translates. Curiosity.
Well, I would say that I would use provided, and the reason why is because when you have this verb used later for the nahal, it's talking about the flowing of a river, and so as the river flows, it uses the same verb to flow, and so here is basically meaning, and he flowed them with bread or with food. So I would say he provided
exactly. Yep, you agree. Yeah, that's basically what Robert Alter says. So he translated as, they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them bread in return for the horses and the stocks of sheep and the stocks of cattle and the donkeys, and he carried them forward with bread in return for all of their livestock that year.
That's how I would do it. And only because when we talk about the rivers in Canaan in the time of the kings, I can't remember which king it was, but there's one where it talks about the rivers the not necessarily the rivers, but the wadis drying up and the water not flowing.
Yeah.
And that's the verb they use there.
Okay.
So verse 18. With the Tom Hashana Hahi, ويبوء إلى بشنا هشنيث ويمر له لو نخحيث مأذني كي امتم هكاسف ومكني حبهما الأذني لو نشعر لفني أذني بلتي ويثينو وأدمثينو.
By the way, it shows here. So first of all, a couple of comments. Tom Shana, that year ended, right? Like, thank God. That was not a good year for them, right? Again, it reminds me of 2020 with the coronavirus and all. It's like, all right, thank God this year's over, right? That was a shitty year, but now the next year is even going to be worse. But at any rate, what was I going to say? I was going to say that, it also shows they came to him the next year, or the second year, literally. And it shows perhaps that it was customary to buy grain for an entire year. You know, during the grain harvest or whatever, you buy grain for an entire year, and then you come back the next year.
Yep.
Perhaps.
Could be. Depends on how much grain they took. But they were taking enough grain for them and their family, so I imagine.
Well,
nobody's
I'm not talking about
2 or 3
Yaakov.
trips.
I'm talking about whoever comes to buy it, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Nobody's gonna make 2 or 3 trips in the same year.
Right.
They're going to take enough at one time.
Yeah.
So, what the Tom Hashana Hahi Wayavu Ila the Shana Hashani, and so that year was complete. And they came to him in the second year, and they said to him, "We will not hide it from our Lord." That, and that's interesting. This is something I've said many times about this Adonai. Adonai and Adoni are spelled identical. They're just vocalized different. Now, here and I've always said that perhaps. Because we talked about this with the messenger that came to Abraham, and he says Adonai, and it could be that that was just a common expression, just like we talked about with the formal speech. And it's interesting that when you see it here, it says lo nichahed, me Adoni. It makes no sense that way, but it would make perfect sense if they were to say lo nichahed me Adonai. Yeah.
Well, why? In the case of Adonai, it was 3 visitors. Adonai means my masters. Here, it's just one person, Pharaoh, Adoni.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking something else. Me Adonu.
Adonu?
Or Adonai.
Okay.
How do you say from our Lord? Me Ado.
Our Lord? Adonenu.
Adonenu. Okay, that's what I'm thinking of.
Okay.
Yeah. But that still wouldn't make sense here.
No. Okay. Any rate, so so now this.
Yeah, well,
you've taken all our money.
Yeah.
You've taken all our livestock. Now all we have left is our land and ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. Verse 19.
Yeah.
למה נמות לעיניך גם אנחנו גם אדמתנו קנה אותנו. Why should we die in front of your eyes? גם אנחנו גם אדמתנו קנה אותנו. Us and our land, buy it, purchase it. ואת אדמתנו בלחם. Wait a second. קנה אותנו, buy us, purchase us. ואת אדמתנו and our land בלחם, in return for bread. Return for grain, literally bread, or food perhaps. ונהיה אנחנו ואדמתנו עבדים לפרעה, and we will And we in our land shall be servants, shall be slaves to Pharaoh. V'tein zera v'nichyeh, and give us seed so that we should live. In other words, seed to plant on the land. V'lo namut v'adama lo tisham. And
that's the same thing that Jacob says to his sons at the beginning of the famine.
What?
Oh,
right, yeah.
You know, and I've said that before too about the Pesach story. It actually begins with the story of Joseph, because that's how they ended up in Egypt and saved from the famine itself.
Yeah, that's for
and
sure.
And then the ending is in Devarim 26, where you to take your first fruits to the Kohen Gadol, and you to repeat that line, Arami Oved Avi, and he went down to Egypt, and he lived there and with a few men, and there he became a great and mighty nation. And that actual statement was made to Yaakov in Beersheba as he's coming down to Egypt. It says he made sacrifices, and God says to him there, don't be afraid to go and live in Egypt, because there I will make you a great and mighty nation. So that's pretty interesting.
Yep. I was going to say that, okay, so here the people selling themselves as slaves to Pharaoh, Avadim la Pharaoh. It's kind of a interesting foreshadowing of what's going to happen to the Israelites under the Pharaoh during the time of Moses, right? They're going to be slaves to Pharaoh. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah, that's it. I'm done.
Okay. Verse 20. ويكن يوسف את كل אדמת מצרים לפרעה, כי מאכילו מצרים איש שדהו, כי חזק עליהם הרעב, ותהי הארץ לפרעה. And that's what I was getting at earlier. It says, and so Joseph purchased, or he acquired, all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, because the Egyptians sold each man his field, because the famine became very strong. And so the land became Pharaoh's. And this is actually, you can look in Egyptian history when you read about it. There's something that all Egyptologists will talk about, but they won't go so far as to say this is it. But it's interesting that here it is. Anyway, verse 21. ואת העם העביר אותו לערים מקצה גבול מצרים ועד קצהו. And ואת העם העביר אותו לערים. And the people he gathered into the city, or that's kind of weird. Says, and the people he gathered to the cities, at the borders of, or the extreme borders of Egypt, from one border to the other. So he gathered the people into the cities.
וכן יוסף את אדמת מצרים לפרעה, כי מכרו מצרים איש שדהו, כי חזק עליהם הרעב, ותהי הארץ לפרעה, ואת העם העביר אותו לערים מקצה גבול מצרים ועד קצהו. Yeah, so he basically, now it's interesting.
That's something I didn't notice before.
וכן יוסף את כל אדמת מצרים לפרעה כי מכרו מצרים איש שדהו כי חזק עליהם הרעב ותהי הארץ לפרעה ואת העם העביר אותו לערים מקצה גבול מצרים ועד קצה. Yeah, he took them off their land. Isn't that exactly what's happened in the United States of America over, let's say, the past 50 or 100 years? People have been taken off their land, which they owned, and centralized in the cities, and the land has been taken over by large corporations,
put into government housing
farming or whatever, like large agricultural corporations, and now people are living in the cities in little hovels.
Yep.
A lot of parallels, a lot of comparisons.
And the only thing that didn't get sold in America is the land of the elites.
Well, they're the ones who took it all over.
Yep. So that's 22. Rach admat hakohanim lo kana ki hok lekohanim me'et par'o wa achilu et hukam asher nathan lahim par'o al kain lo machiru et admatam. Only the land of the Kohanim he didn't purchase because it was a ordinance for the Kohanim from Pharaoh, and they ate their hukam, their ordinance, which Pharaoh gave to them, and for that reason they didn't sell the land. So evidently he provided. It was a when it talks about their hukam, their right from this ordinance.
We saw that the basically where it says bechluet hukam, it means the produce, the what's the word I'm looking for? The effects of that law upon them, or the fruits of that law upon them. We saw a similar word last week. Remember, I pointed it out. I can't remember what it is right now, but where you have this construct where it speaks about something, but it's really talking about the results of that thing or the fruits of that thing. I can't remember which word it was. It was in last week's Parsha.
Yeah. We have a comment from Jordan. I didn't see it. Yeah, Jordan says, I personally always felt like too many regional species of animals exist for the flood to have been global. That's a good point. That's a big point that a lot of people point out.
What do you say?
That the species of animals, there's too many species of animals around the world for there to have been an actual global flood.
Of course. And what are you going to do? The kangaroos are going to come hopping from Australia? That's what I've been saying. It just doesn't make any sense. Well, we got kangaroos and llamas that are going to come from Peru. I mean, how's this going to work?
I don't know.
Polar bears are going to come down from the Arctic and hop into Noah's Ark, and
You could say anything happened with a miracle.
True. You could.
Anything.
That's a good question. So where are we? Hukam. Verse 23. ويومر يوسف الحام هين كنيتي أتخم هيوم وأد مدخم لفرعون هين لخم زرع وزرعتم at Adamah. And that's a really weird thing to say, but anyway, it says so Joseph says to the people, look, I've purchased you this day as well as your land,
right,
for Pharaoh. So hey lachem zera. So now this is where you get this idea of the word hey. Hey just means hey, here. Here's something. But that's the name of the letter, hey. And of course, in Proto Canaanite or whatever you call it, it's written like a stick-figured man holding his hands up, saying "Hey." Well, anyways, but yeah, it's funny. But anyway, so he said, "Hey, here is seed for you, and zera'atim et ha'adamah, and so you shall sow the land."
Yeah, in other words, take in other words, like, take this damn seed and start sowing the land. Like, hey, here's your seed. Start sowing the land. So they're now living in the cities, which are like, I guess you can kind of think of them as like, like labor camps or something like that, or labor. Like in China, if you work in the factory, they have these like labor dormitories where you sleep like 8 per room. So here it is. They've all been moved into the cities. They're living in their little hovels and their little apartments or whatever. And they're going out and working Pharaoh's land, which used to be their land, which now belongs to Pharaoh, belongs to the elites. They've been, they've been stripped of all their money, their possessions, their cattle, their livestock, and now their land and their very selves, and they're living in these, these cities where they're basically laborers who are now going out and working the land that is Pharaoh's, that used to be theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds just like the United States of America, quite frankly. Especially,
well, you're not the only ones who make that comparison.
I'm sure I'm not. It's obvious, almost.
Yeah.
When the elites get out of control, or when the when the elites get out of control, they can't stop. They just take more and more and more and more.
Yep. So Wahaya, this is verse 24.
Yeah.
Wahaya بتبوء ونثتم خميشيت لفرعون وأربع هيادوث يهي لكم لزرع حسدين ولأخلكم ولأشير ببتيخم ولأخول لتفخم. And so there's that word again, tough.
Yeah.
And so it says, and it shall be at the Tavua, which means literally the produce of the land, what comes out, that you shall set a fifth for Pharaoh, and 4 portions shall be for you for seed, Zera Hasadeh, for seed of the field, and for your sustenance, and also for your houses, and for food for your you said children, or I'm saying this is talking about the entire family, but here's the same word taf, which means
your
literally
babies,
children, your little ones.
Yeah. But if it's a famine, how is all this stuff even supposed to grow?
Now that's what I'm getting. That's what I'm getting at. There, a lot of people will probably have heard me say that in the first 2 years of the famine, of the famine, this is when the sons of Yaakov came. Okay, and it was during this time. Now we read after the events this story, this little cut here about the selling of the land and how bad this is and all of that. Now, there's a grammatical thing that happens in Hebrew where you have what's called a while consecutive. When it begins a clause with a non-verb, when you have a non-verbal clause at the beginning, then basically that's what's called a disjunctive while. And usually what that's used for is to break the narrative sequence so that the narrative is no longer sequential in order, but now you have a parenthetical phrase within the narrative talking about something that had already happened, but they're just mentioning it now. And this is what we're looking at. So this is just still at the beginning of the first 2 years of the famine that this is happening. And so while there wasn't probably enough water with the flooding, because I mentioned how I kept saying for Ra'av, I kept saying drought last week, and I had to correct myself. This wasn't really a drought. This is a famine, but the famine had to do with the the crops in the land. That there wasn't enough crops to feed anything, which is where the famine came from. And so there was something going on with the weather, probably the rain cycle, and you had a drought, which caused the trickle down effect to where eventually the Nile stopped flooding over like it normally does. And this probably was a slow process. So in the first 2 years, they were able to sow, but it didn't produce as much as it did the year before, and then eventually it just stopped. And so this is the process we're going through at the moment. So now, this is at the beginning of the, in my opinion, the first 2 years of the famine, or it could have been at the last part of the years of plenty when they were still able to do it, but then eventually, it's going to have to stop. And that's just my opinion, but that's a grammatical feature, and it starts in verse 13. And that's where you start with an actual parenthetical narrative. Where am I? We're on the math tier. Okay.
Oh, wow. No kidding.
So 25. وَيَوْمَرُوا يثانوا نمسحين بأني أدوني وهينوا عبديم لفارعون. And so they said, you have saved us. May we find grace in the eyes of my Lord. And we shall be slaves to Pharaoh.
Yep.
20.
And I have a song for that. Hold on a second. I'd like to play a song. I like to play my song. 1 second. 1 second. Ready?
Yeah.
This is going to work. Oh my. 1 second. Here we go. Right. Keep going. Here we go. Wait a second. It's a Passover song. Actually, the other version I used to sing is Avadim Ayinu Lefaro B'Mitzrayim. But this is it's about the Israelites getting free. But
yep, we have 2 verses left in the parasha. So we have 2 verses. I'm gonna read them both because they're pretty short. And that'll be the last 2 verses of the parasha for the Shabbat, which is amazing. So verse 26 and 27, I will read together. وياسم أوثا يوسف لحوق عاد حيوم هزي على عظمة مصرايم لفرعون لحومش راق عظمة حكوهنيم لفدم لو حيث لفرعون ويشف يسرائيل بأرض مصرايم بأرض جوشن ويعبد ahazu va yifru yirbu me'od. And so Joseph set it as an ordinance, even unto this day. What day that is probably when Moses wrote this.
Yep.
Upon the land of Egypt, for Pharaoh. This is an ordinance that there would be a 5th or 20% tax on the people. Only in the land of the Kohanim alone, it didn't belong to Pharaoh. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen. Okay, and he had a possession there, or he had, a possession there.
So just think about it. Just think about it now for a second. So Pharaoh owns the land. He's basically letting them work the land that he's now taking from them as serfs for a 20% tax on whatever they make, and the rest they can't all keep it for themselves, because as it says up above, they have to use a lot of that for seed for the next year's crops, right? I don't know. I've never been.
No. The fifth of the produce, the fifth belongs to the 4 parts belong to them and for their house.
That's what I'm saying. So they're giving 20% to Pharaoh.
Yep.
The 4/5 they have left, it's not all going to go into their hands, because they have to use a lot of it, as it mentions above, for seed. They have to use seed to plant for the next year.
Yep, that's true.
So I've never been a farmer. I don't know what percentage of the harvest has to be put aside for next year's seed, but I imagine it's a fair amount,
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
And then the rest there, I would imagine he left them basically with a subsistence level, existence, and he's taken all the rest. But I guess the thing I want to point out is, again, the analogy we see with the United States of America today, where once again, people are herded, they're taken off the land. Their land is bought out by the large corporations, or just taken away by the government or the banks. They're herded into the cities, or they're left to work as basically as low wage workers on the land that maybe they used to own, or their grandparents used to own, or their great grandparents used to own, and they have to pay exorbitant taxes to the government. But actually 20% is nothing. In the United States, you have to pay 35%, 40%. I don't know what the top tax rate is. So Pharaoh was actually a pretty nice guy. His tax rate was only 20%. That's not so bad. In the United States, it's like 35%.
But you have
New York
this
State,
idea.
like another 5% on top of that, because they take a whole bunch as well.
Yeah, interesting too is in the Quran you have this khums. The khums belongs to the head of state, and technically, the khums belongs to the family of Muhammad. But it's interesting that this khums for the head of state actually began with Joseph.
Okay, interesting.
But anyway, so that is the end of Parashath WayYigash. And next week we will be reading through the life of Yaakov, the death. It's the end of his life now.
Yeah, it pretty much is. He's already in Egypt. He's done his part. His days were short and bitter, but he did his part, right?
I don't
He had
know.
12
147
kids.
years old is almost 2 centuries.
Yes, but less than, as he points out, less than Abraham and Isaac, right?
Yeah.
So
how old was Abraham?
Abraham was 175, I believe.
Yeah.
Yaakov, I believe, was 138 when he died, if I remember correctly.
Yitzhak
was 138. Oh, okay.
Yaakov was 147.
Oh, so Yaakov actually lives longer than Yitzhak?
Mm.
Really? So?
Yeah, let's see.
All right.
Let's see when he died.
Hold on a second. I'll solve this problem really quickly. Hey Siri, how long did Isaac live for? Siri doesn't want to answer.
Oh my goodness.
What?
When you're looking for something, no, it's just when you're looking for something, it seems like it takes forever to find it.
Well, it's not a big deal, really. But it would be interesting if Jacob lived longer than Isaac, since he said to Pharaoh that his lives have been his life has been shorter and more bitter than that of his forefathers. You know.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think it mentioned when he died.
Really? Oh, maybe 138 was Sarah. Sarah 138, maybe.
I was wondering why I didn't. Couldn't find it. Yeah, because evidently this is where Isaac leaves.
Yeah.
I mean, Isaac dies. Jacob takes off, but it doesn't actually say how old Isaac was when he died.
No kidding.
Yeah. I think I vaguely remember that because
Still there? Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here. I think I
Uh-oh.
vaguely remember that because I remember I was trying to do a timeline and I couldn't find when Isaac died or how old he was. I could find where he died, but couldn't find how old he was. Let me look over here. Maybe it's Chronicles. Nope, don't say it here either. No, it's interesting. Anyways, did Medical leave?
Been looking it up, so I'm backstage.
Whoa.
Hello?
He died age
Yep.
100.
I got you back in.
I've got my research assistant looking it up. 180.
He was 180.
I'm not sure
Yep.
where it says that, but okay. So Yaakov did live less than his forefathers.
Yeah.
So he didn't lie to Pharaoh. Not they would have known anyway, because he wasn't dead yet, so he doesn't know exactly how long he's gonna live. Although I guess he's talking about up until that point.
Up
right?
up until that point. Genesis 35:28. Let's see.
Yeah.
There we go. We got our
35. Oh, okay.
Yeah, 180 years old. There it is.
Okay.
Who buried him? In the days I was 180 years old, and I was fire and died. Oh, okay. So he died when Jacob came back. Isn't that weird? Or did he? Or did he die and they buried him and then he left?
Oh, right, because Ishmael and no, I'm sorry, that's Ishmael buried Abraham. I don't know. I don't remember. I think that when Isaac came back. Oh no, we're talking. What am I saying?
No, Jacob came back. And Jacob came to Isaac, his father,
Okay.
at Mamre, to the city of Arba, where Abraham lived. And so Isaac died when Jacob got back. So he got to see his father before he died.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's something. I never noticed that either. ويبو يعقوب إلى يساع حبيب ممري كيريات حاربة He Hebron asher gor sham Abraham ويتach ويحيو يمي يتach مئة شنا وشمعين شنا ويقوى يتach ويموت ويهي السيف إلى أحماف زاخين وسبع يمين ويقبروا أثو عيسى ويعقوب بناه. That's interesting. Anyway, so next week we read about the death of Yaakov, and well, do we read about the blessings? I remember I always have trouble with these blessings because they always have a pile of words you never see again. Let's see. Next week is ويحيي يعقوب بأرض مصرين 17 سنة. And that is, the last parasha of Shemot. Bereshit. Wow, man, we got one Shabbat to go, then we're gonna be in Shemot. That's gonna be a cool one.
Yeah,
like Shemot.
definitely.
I like
Shemot is cool. They're all cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's the end of the parasha. Is there any questions? Here we go. Nicola has one. It's funny that Isaac presented himself as about to die much before. That's right. That's what I was getting at. It seems
Robert
like Isaac and Jacob were pretty pessimistic about their lifespan.
Maybe a person has a sense of when they're coming to the end.
Yeah, man, but that's over 20 years in between. He died 20 years later.
I think it was 17 years exactly. Believe it or not.
No, he was. It says he was 20 years in with Lavan.
Oh no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about. Oh, what are you talking about?
When Jacob fled from Isaac, Isaac said he was about to die. Said, "Come here and bless me so that my soul can die." And then he was like 20 years with Lavan in that process, being there and coming back.
Right.
And so this was 20 years in between when he says, "I'm, let my soul bless you before I die."
Right.
And he still lingered on for 20 more years.
Right. Well, 21 in the larger perspective is not a lot of time, right?
No, not really.
Yeah.
When I look at, I'll be 47 next month.
Wow.
And tell me about it. I'm surprised I lived this long. But if I happen to live to be 94, that means I've got another 47 years to go. So that means I have just as much ahead of me as I've now got behind me. If I happen to live to be 97,
well, you better lay off the Coca-Cola. I'll tell you that much, because every time I see you're drinking Coca-Cola,
that's what's keeping me alive. I should write them and get some money for that, right? That's like free advertising.
Get some money. You're already giving them probably all your money buying that shit.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's terrible. Oh, you get on me all the time. I have to sneak and buy it because you don't allow me to drink it.
I hear you. Well,
putting
it on camera is not exactly a way to do it in discreetly.
Sorry, baby.
Anyway.
Yeah, I need to stop drinking that crap. I need to drink more water. But I always tell her it's like 99% water.
That's true, and the rest is sugar.
No.
In Israel, I used to make when I found myself drinking too much of that soft drinks. Oh, okay, that's even worse. When I found myself drinking too much of that soft drink stuff, what we did one time is what we started doing one time is we would get juice concentrate. We'd find like cherry concentrate and seltzer water, and add the cherry concentrate to the seltzer water, and it actually tasted more delicious than Coca-Cola, and it was it was healthy, low in calories. So.
All right, so I'm gonna end the broadcast, but I'm not gonna close the room. We can still hang out and talk if you want. But I'm I'm
Well,
go
before you
ahead
end
and
it, any final comments by any of the people listening that they would like to ask or say? Or Yardain, you have anything to say? Yardain is not
One question.
always has a lot to say. Well, not always, but sometimes. I know Yardain personally very well.
Hakan, listen.
Yes, I would like to ask one question. Where
Remember,
would you locate the flood, geographically?
That's what we were asking earlier. We know according to the Torah, it says that the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. If those mountains are the same mountains we know today as the mountains of Ararat, then that's up in eastern Turkey somewhere.
Yes, it's at the border, Turkey, Armenia.
But we do know
The
that
mountain Ararat, where the ark landed, and where would you locate the the flood in itself?
that's a good question. That's what we were asking.
Right.
That depends on if it's a global flood, like we assume, or if it's a regional flood, like some people assume. I don't really know, and for me, that's not really important.
Mm-hmm. For me, it is important because it gets to a very fundamental principle, which is the historicity of the Tanakh. Is the Tanakh speaking in true historical terms, or is it using allegories? Was there a miracle involved? Were there miracles involved? Were there not miracles involved? For me, it's an extremely important question, and I don't have an answer. I actually joined a Facebook group recently, called something like Noah's Flood or something, or the Flood of Noah, and they try to address some of these questions, but I haven't had really a chance to go through their answers. But for me, it's a huge question. Actually, it gets right to the heart of the matter about what is the Torah, and what is it trying to accomplish, and it's just so hard to take it literally that the entire world was flooded. It just doesn't make sense unless you bring in, as Volky said, unless you bring into the picture, the fact that miracles occurred, which could happen, I guess, but I'd rather not take that route unless I have to.
Yeah. Well,
but then again, if the flood didn't cover the entire earth, then how is it that everybody died? Because unless our human history is wrong, and everyone at that point was still concentrated in the area around the Mediterranean Sea, which is possible. That's entirely possible. I think the dates may be way off for like migrations to South America, North America, and all that stuff. But unless that were the case, then that means that the flood didn't kill everybody. There were other people still living in North America and China and Korea and God knows where else. Africa.
Yeah. Well, there's several things that I've always found interesting. Being in the environmental technology industry for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I've drilled holes all over the place, in the mountains, in the valleys, on the seacoast, even here in Germany, I've drilled wells. And
really, I didn't know you were doing drilling in Germany. Really?
Yep. I was drilling wells here in Germany and Austria, so I don't care where I go. Even here now, according to geologists, these mountains, the mountain range here, the Alps, was created from the glaciers.
Mm-hmm.
These are glacial mountains, and of course we have the lakes here, the different lakes in Germany. Those are also glacial lakes. They were dug out by glaciers. That's no doubt.
Right.
And the last glacial maximum, which means where the glaciers have reached the end of their run, was about 18,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now you just think about this. When the glaciers it comes from the north. Okay, it's not coming from the south. It's coming from the north, and it's pushing stuff up. It's pushing the dirt up. So whatever might have been laid out if there was a global flood at that time, would probably be dug up and deposited. From our point of view, it would have went down into these glacial lakes at the bottom of these deep glacial lakes with the runoff from all this meltwater. And so that means that the overburden that we see on these mountains and in these valley peaks, that's the overburden that's built up since the time of the glaciers. And so anytime you drill a well in rock country, the first thing you have to do is drill through all this overburden, which is all this broke up crap. And until you hit the hard rock, then you put a casing in and you can actually really get some depth. But no matter where I go in the mountains, when I drill through the overburden in mountains, or in the valleys, or even on coastal plains, in anywhere in between, I always find seashells and stuff like that. And I've always wondered about that. How do you get seashells on top of mountains?
Well, I mean, they've, it's known, for instance, in, I'm going to say, I think it's I do remember now. It's the Colorado Plateau, which is what the Grand Canyon is dug out of. But it basically is a highland all around Arizona, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, like that whole those four corner states or whatever they call them. So that if you dig there, you'll find a whole bunch of fossils of sea creatures, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's inland and it's a plateau. So they say that many years ago it was a low-lying sea, and then eventually it I guess it dried out and then raised up. There was a raising of that area, and so now it's a high plateau. So the Grand Canyon, I think, is about the top of the Grand Canyon is about 5,000 feet above sea level, but in that entire area you'll find the fossils. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on there. I mean, but this is all all took place probably before the flood, I would imagine, unless our geological histories and our biological histories are way off, which is a possibility.
Yeah,
I don't discount that.
No, I don't either. I remember we talking about this. This is gonna be funny. There was a doctor, I can't remember his name. I just remember reading something he wrote. He was a bone doctor. And he was looking at the Neanderthal and all these really ancient bones, talking about how dense the bones are. And he wrote in this article that he wrote, and I wish I could find it. I wish I could remember his name. I read it once and forgot, and now I think about it and wish I'd kept all that. But he basically made the claim that when you look at Neanderthal bones, those are just remains of people who had a really extremely long life. And he explained why they have such a massive, dense bone in certain places is because the bones of humans continue to grow and build up over time. And that if you have a human that lived 300 or 400 years, that's exactly what their bone structure would look like, according to him. I don't know if that's true or not, but okay. Is that Volky laughing at me?
Yeah, of course.
Volky, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna make a special trip just to see you. Laugh at me.
Here, you talk to them directly.
Get you. I'm gonna get you a little cat too.
Oh boy, you're gonna sick your big cat on our little cat.
That didn't sound right the way I said that, but okay. Look, I'm gonna end the program.
Yeah, it's been a while,
so that we can joke around a little bit.
I'm just laughing at the story. It's just
yeah. So I appreciate everyone coming and participating. I hope to see everyone next week. If you have any questions about this parasha or any of them, they're all online. You can always write in the comments. So I'd like to say Shabbat Shalom to everyone and Shavua Tov as well.
Oops, disconnected by mistake. Yeah.